Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 102 of Mythos Busters. I am Sean. Joining me today... Oh, this is weird. I can actually look at you guys while I talk. This is new for me. I fell out of rhythm. We've got Nick. Hey, Nick.
Hello.
How are your paws?
A little sore from the number of times I had to pull the trigger on that shotgun. But...
Boy, you really did, like, every problem, the solution was shotgun. Every single one. It was.
I haven't played shotgun in over a year, and I'm very pleased that I got maximum use out of it. I think I fired 7-8 rounds with it. So.
Yeah, it was a real good time, and we beat Barkham handily. The one thing I'm really sad about is that Ian did not get to use his signature, which is possibly the best card that's ever been created in the game.
Yes, that's accurate.
How are you doing, Ian?
I'm good, yeah. Obviously, we're just coming off that Barkham stream extravaganza, so always good getting a chance to play 4-player with you guys again. And yeah, I didn't get a chance to use that signature, but I did have my dog use Switchblade 2 like a billion times, so.
Always good. Always good. Unfortunately, Scott's not able to join us today. He's got too many family members running around in his recording area to join at the moment, so we will catch him on the next one. We've got a fairly high and tight, all business, all killer, no filler type episode for you guys today. Sorry, I just had to keep the Sum 41 references rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to catch up on some news, and then today's discussion topic, we are talking about investigator classes, essentially. There's got to be a better way to describe it. So basically just kind of a state of the game as far as class design goes. We're going to talk about where the classes are, where they've come, and how it started versus how it's going, I guess, to use the meme format. But before we get to any of that, we actually have a little bit of time to talk about like Arkham we've played lately, which is a thing we haven't had time for in a while. So what campaigns do you guys have going at the moment? Anything worth mentioning?
I'll be quick because I have nothing new. I haven't played any Arkham since we last recorded. I have my Return to Carcosa campaign that I'm running with Joe Diamond and Lola. Haven't played that one in a while, but it was going okay. Joe's doing a lot of work, and Lola's hanging around. And then I also have my Innsmouth campaign. I have 2 Innsmouth campaigns. One I'm doing two-handed with Mateo and Mary, which I've talked about a few times in the past. That one hasn't made any progress in the last few weeks. And then the other one is with my wife, which we're still back on. Oh, we did In Too Deep last, okay. So we have some ground to cover, but that's Rex and Silas is rough in that one. That was my blind campaign to start, so Silas is rocking I think 3 or 4 trauma on there. Yeah, he's not doing well.
Yeah,
but he's a lot of fun to play.
Innsmouth is very, very unforgiving, I find, and almost in like a different way than TFA. Like TFA just like RKOs you out of nowhere with certain mechanics.
Well, I think the frustrating, for me at least, with comparing TFA to Innsmouth, the frustrating thing with TFA was that it would punish you for making certain choices outside of the game itself, specifically with supplies. Like, oh, you didn't bring this supply? You have a trauma now. Oh, you didn't bring this supply? You have this other, that sort of thing. Which Return to, does a soft address to that, where now more supplies have more in-game effects. But I wasn't a big fan of that. Innsmouth is just, there's a lot of enemies. And they can snowball you, especially in scenarios like In Too Deep.
And they're taxing, like, even if you're doing it well, right? Like...
Yes, yeah. Even if you're playing the enemy game, just engaging them is rough. So yeah, that's all I've had, really. And then, obviously, our 4-player Barkham game, which was really fun. again, shooting shotgun 8 times and doing 19 out of 20 damage on the final boss.
That was so perfect.
With
They
the
became
shotgun.
1 point short after doing all that work.
Yeah, so that's me.
Definitely go check that out it's on our Twitch, and I'll be exporting it to YouTube shortly. So by the time this episode releases, it should be out there if you haven't seen it. It's actually one of the quicker 4-player games I think I've ever played of anything.
Yeah, totally.
I think we clocked in under 2 hours on that one. Ian, how about you? What you been playing?
Well, in addition to, since last time I got the Layer of Dagon pack and played that scenario a couple times, which is fun. But I think I mentioned last time around that I was starting on Return to Carcosa with Father Mateo and Nathaniel Cho. And since the last time we recorded, I put them all the way through Carcosa and actually got a win in Return to Carcosa, the conviction route.
Nice.
But the main thing was really putting the new kind of Father Mateo through his paces. And I say the new Father Mateo just because this cycle has given him so many new toys.
Spelled N-U with an umlaut, right?
Yeah, exactly. His deck building used to be really kind of paltry options, like he can grab bless cards, but there's so few. But now I was able to add some more cards in there and all the bless token effects. So the main kind of shtick was running Blessing of Isis, which is when you draw 2 bless tokens, then they become the second one becomes an Elder Sign, and you get to return both back to your bag. Olive McBride was really kind of the MVP of the whole build because she would just help kind of spam bless tokens and even just grabbing Elder Signs for Father Mateo out. So he would get, I don't even know how many Elder Signs per game, which was great. And even without that, just having that many bless tokens in the bag was helpful. I had Recall the Future in there too. Radiant Smite did some work. So I don't know. Father Mateo used to be one of those investigators that I was not excited to play at all, and now he's so much fun to play. Like, I am legit excited to play that deck. Like, that's
What, you mean
how
you
much
weren't-
things have changed.
Before, you weren't excited to play a deck of 28 Mystic cards and 2 copies of custom ammunition?
With a once per game ability.
For the longest time, that was the only bless card there was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I for a very long time, Mateo has been my least played Mystic. But Ian, since you talked about him on the last episode that we recorded, I stole your list and made a standalone version of it. And one of the big games I played recently is I took my sister and her fiance through War of the Outer Gods, and I played that Mateo deck. And very, very specifically, we all played with Bless only. So I had the Blurst team before. We became Team Bless instead. And that ended up being really fun. And like, I never even got Blessing of Isis to fire, but even with Olive and Blesses, and I just happened to have a good game and pull a decent amount of Elder Signs. I think I pulled like 3 or 4 Elder Signs that game. Like, yeah, I'm officially finally on the Mateo train. Welcome to the fold, brother.
Yeah. And another interesting find from that campaign was through various reasons, Nathaniel Cho ended up with 3 mental trauma, and I was trying to figure out a good solution. And then I looked at a card I haven't looked at forever, which is Moment of Respite, which is a neutral 3 XP, I think. But the important thing is it's spirit traded. So Nathaniel Cho can grab it with the old boxing glove. So I use that at least once per game.
So thematically, you're just using your boxing gloves as like a pillow, right? Is that what that is?
Sounds pretty comfy. And then, so the next thing for me, now that I've given Bless a good workout, I'm investigating Curse. But I'm only a couple scenarios in with a Dexter build, which I'm calling Dex Dangerous. And,
I like it.
Approved.
and then Roland on the other side, who I haven't played for a long, long time. So.
Ooh, Roland, yeah. That's a cat that hasn't hit table for me since, God, maybe Carcosa?
Yeah, it's been so long.
Wow.
Interesting.
Well, Ian, didn't you do that Hungering Blade Roland build a few months ago?
It was longer. That is probably the last time I played Roland, but it's probably longer than that at this point.
Sure.
Maybe like a year ago.
Okay.
But yeah, that was a fun Roland build.
Are you
So far-
playing? Did you pick Roland because of Mother's Embrace and his appearance in that game?
Oh, look at him! Look at him! You got him! You
I did.
Dead to rights.
Well, I was with him, so
It was definitely partially influenced by that, because at first I was trying decks with Harvey as a partner, and it was just too much enemy management to ask Dexter to do with just Armageddon as like the main spell tool, because I'm trying to run like all the kind of cursey suite.
yeah, totally.
So then I was like, okay, Harvey's not going to cut it. Oh, what about Roland? He has Seeker Access, because I wanted Seeker Access because they have cards to put curses in the bag. And then we did that stream of Mother's Embrace with the very interesting voice acting of Roland, and I was like, I know Roland. He's perfect.
There's something hinky going on in here.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Amazing. For my part, I've got a couple of multiplayer campaigns, and then obviously the 4-player standalone that I played. So my multiplayer palette is a flush with options. So I have actually taken to a little bit of true solo in recent days.
Nice.
So I've got one campaign where I'm refining my true solo Diana deck, and it's doing really well through Innsmouth. Well, I feel like, and this is only after one time through it, but I feel like there are some scenarios in Innsmouth where just true solo, you're not going to do well compared to what a multiplayer team can do.
Yeah, I can see that.
With the way movement and locations are in Innsmouth, it's just... in particular, Devil Reef, I got one of the objectives and was like, I felt like I was on it and firing, and aside from just the RNG of where the locations showed up, I felt like I played that really well. How the hell did I only end up with one?
Yeah.
But that's just the way it is. But man, there is an appeal, there is a charm, there's a bit of a magic to true solo. It's completely without mercy and can be really swingy sometimes, but there definitely is a magic to it that I often forget when I go periods without having played it. But
yeah, it's actually been a while since I played true solo. I've been doing pretty much only two-handed, and I think now it's because the list of investigators I haven't played is just growing. So I need to catch up on that. I think when we talked about it last, I think there were 6 investigators that haven't hit table for me yet. And I'm like, gosh, I'm a Mythos buster, and there's 6 of these guys I haven't played. Like, come on, Nick. So
yeah, and two-handed solos or two-handed is a really great way to do that, because not only do you just get more things on the table, but moving from true solo, you have the ability to actually try out more flexibility to try out different builds. Because solo really, really funnels you down. You must take care of everything. Avenues.
Two-handed solo Dream Chaser is the way to try out many investigators at once.
Not Dream Chaser, Dream Eaters.
Oh yeah, Dream Eaters.
It's what you do with the dream.
I got my Lord of the Rings brain in Dream Chaser.
Yeah, I'll save it for Tentacle time, but I've played a few games of Lord of the Rings recently too, and I don't want to shame your instinct there at all, Ian. Dream Chaser is still peak Lord of the Rings LCG. It's so good. Anyway, all right, so just a few updates here. I'll mention again that Dissonant Voices, which is our voiceover project, is now integrated with Arkham DB. If you're a patron at any level, you can access files and sounds of us reading story for you. You can just sit there if you want. Probably you'll just be futzing around with cards, though. That's what I do. So again, huge thanks to North 101 and Zizorba for making that integration happen. It's so smooth. It's so nice. I can't imagine what going back to what it was before would be like. So we just finished our Barkham stream. We are going to try most months, any month that we can, the last Sunday of the month, to do a 4-player stream with whatever we choose. I don't know, maybe we'll start a campaign if we get regular enough with this, but for now we're just doing standalones. I think Consternation on the Constellation is up next, right? We'll finally pick up that failed stream that just eluded us that one time.
I haven't played that one in a long time. I'm excited to get back to it.
Yeah, it'll really get the juices going for our next scenario that we have to come up with. So anyway, last Sunday of every month is when that's tentatively planned for, but obviously check Discord and we'll announce it as we actually solidify things. All right. Oh boy, Justin's not here. Nick, do you feel equipped to talk March to Madness?
Sure. Okay, so last year we did March to Madness, thanks to Justin, our administrative answer. That is a fun March Madness sort of spin-off that was Arkham Horror related, where we took all of the investigators, we put them in we created a seed for them, kind of ranked them by tier, and then they went head-to-head, and everybody voted on who they thought would or is the better investigator out of the pairing that they had. And last year, Ursula beat out, who was it? Ashcan Pete, Duke, in the final. So everyone agreed. Well, not agreed, but the votes came in, and Ursula was considered the top investigator last year. This year, we're doing it again. Currently, we're seeding the investigators. So this is going to determine how investigators will be arranged in the final bracket, what sort of matchups will happen each round, that sort of thing. And we need your guys' help for this seeding process, because there's a lot of investigators, and the more people we get to do this, the more accurate, quote-unquote, question mark it'll be. So basically, we will have links. I'll throw one in Discord here real quick, or if Ian or Sean wouldn't mind doing that for me, that'd be great. Also have it in the show notes of today's episode. You're going to go to that link and you're going to put investigators into a tier list. Now, there are 10 tiers to fill out, and you must use all 10 tiers. You have to have a minimum of 4 investigators per tier and a maximum of 6. So you really have to spread them around. I think when I first did it, I had 1 investigator in tier 10, 1 in tier 9, that sort of thing. And then I had like 9 of them in tier 2, and I hit submit, and it's like, no, you can't do that. You have to spread them out. I was like, oh, shoot, okay.
It felt really bad because you were so stressed. You were like, oh my God, I finally figured it out. My tier, all right, I'm done with it. And then Justin was like,
Yeah, it was so hard for me to get down to 9 people in tier 2 and 9 in tier 3. So it was even more work, but it's still a lot of fun. If you've already submitted a list that didn't quite hit those rules, like if you did this early before those rules were in place, then it'll be adjusted accordingly. But for going forward, please keep it to 4 per tier, maximum of 6, just so that we can really spread it around and get a more diverse pool. And then finally, save an image of your results, and then email that image to the Mythosbusters email, which is mythosbusterspod@gmail.com. Again, email an image of your final list to mythosbusterspod@gmail.com. And then once we get the seed done, then we will be, then we'll actually have something to go with when we do our March to Madness. So we'll be able to vote on who we think would win in each matchup. And when you're creating your seed lists, there's different ways to do it. I kept falling back to who is the most versatile and who is the most reliable. And those were kind of like my 2 main goals. So my tier 1 seeds are all investigators that I think are super versatile and super reliable. But you can really go however you want. You can go what you think is just the best investigators. You can go purely who are your favorites. You can rank it based on who you've played the most. There were 6 investigators in there I had never played, and I had to try and rank them based off of just my perception of their abilities.
And so they were all in like your upper half too. So
they were all tier 5 and up. Essentially,
that says something. I'm sure as hell not sure what it says, but it says something.
I give the benefit of the doubt. That's what it says. You can go based on deck building, if you think they have really good deck building rules, how fun and interesting you think the investigators are for standalone versus campaigns. So there's a lot of different ways that you can rank these. That's totally up to you. Just as long as we get a seed list from you or a ranking from you to then put into the seed, that'd be great. Tier lists will be accepted until April 3rd, so we are getting close to that cutoff date. Prediction brackets will then be made available sometime in the week after April 3rd. We'll have more info about that when we get closer. You can check our website, obviously, for more information.
And we'll be announcing what fabulous prizes will go to the winners who get the good brackets.
Totally. And we've had a lot of submissions already, but it is still very close. So every single submission we get matters. Justin has said multiple times in our Discord that a significant number of investigators are just 1 or 2 seeds away from being moved up or down a tier. So this is really close. So keep sending those in. Again, you have until April 3rd. Yeah, he has a note here. Nearly half of the investigators could make their way into the top seeds if 3 or 4 lists break their way. So
that tells me that there is wide variance.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, goodness.
Yep. And there are no tiers with a runaway. A single tier list could potentially move certain investigators from one seed to another immediately higher or lower. So yeah, send those in. You have until April 3rd. And then we're excited to then get to the voting sometime the week following that. So,
and if you need any inspiration, Scott and I streamed doing our tier lists together. Scott had a very, very specific criteria for doing his tier list that put, I want to say, yeah, anyway, just go watch that. It's a very short video. And then I do mine live. So if you need a little bit of inspiration, that's out there too on our YouTube. Fantastic. Let's go to the voicemail. Okay, so we've been promising for 3 episodes. It's finally here. So our prompt for the Mythos Busters hotline was, what investigator is your pet investigator and why? So we got a few responses here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run through the responses, and then the last one actually has a decent discussion question to fire off on. That we'll take from there.
Hey guys, this is Tim. Been a long time fan since basically the start, and love your show. Congratulations on 100. Hey, I just wanted to throw out a challenge to you all, which would be to build a Lola deck. Lola's been the worst investigator since the start, since she was released, really, and I think the pool's grown now that. I think it's her time. So there's my challenge to you. Hope you guys have a great 100 and keep listening. Keep doing what you do. You guys are great. Thanks.
So thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. I built a Lola deck, like I said, for my Carcosa campaign, my return to Carcosa. I think, she obviously has more options, but she
always has.
Yeah, and I think I hate to beat a dead horse, but I feel like the biggest drawbacks for playing Lola are just they're in the cards that you have to include in a Lola deck, which is her main ability and then her weaknesses. It's just so, like, she slows you down. Her main ability slows you down so much. Like, it doesn't seem like a lot until you're in the heat of the moment and you realize I only get 1 free switch each turn. When do I use it? When is it important to do that? And then the signature weaknesses, which I have said that I don't think they're as bad as Sean and Scott often say. I still think that there are worse investigator weaknesses, but those can, if you're not building with those in mind and playing with those in mind, they can wreck your day. And she can go from everything's peachy to everything's terrible so quick that I think that I don't know. But she has so many new tools. Ian and I were just discussing with Barkham previously. I was talking about the rogue card that came in Lair of Dagon and how that one is another, like, +1 to every skill. Granted, it has a pretty significant cost of not being able to play or commit or draw cards. But, like, there's more and more things that just give passive skill boosts now. So I think that she is getting closer to a build that could be pretty solid. And then, of course, when we get returned to TCU, all those tarots.
That's kind of what I'm waiting on. Like, I keep opening Arkham DB to build a Lola deck, and then I close it out and do something else. But partially that's just not even me. That's not me trying to dump on Lola. That's just sometimes it feels overwhelming because there's so many options, and sometimes it's easier just to build a more focused investigator. But a big part of it mostly is just knowing those tarots are coming, and I kind of just want to wait to return to TCU and just build like a super tarot Lola build, because the one Lola build that I found that I did enjoy was at Arkham Nights, whenever in-person Arkham Nights happened last time, where I built a Lola tarot build, and that actually worked really well, so I'm interested to see what we can do with a lot more tarots.
Yeah. And yeah, I mentioned this on the stream, but I just want to make my actual position on Lola a little bit more clear, because there have actually been a few people through the life of the podcast since Lola has released and our general opinion of her has come out who have been like, guys, just stop. I'm not in the business of knocking Lola out of anyone's hands. If I'm not here to convince you that you should not like Lola. She does definitely still rank in the bottom for me. When we did tiers, I think my main thing was like, these are just investigators where if I'm reaching in a deck box, this is the order in which I would just, all other things equal, grab them out, right? And one of the big things for me is I really, really like investigators who play differently from other investigators. And Lola on her face seems like she would fit that bill. But I think that the way she plays, where you're kind of pre-planning your roles and quite often thinking about what do I need to end on so that my weakness doesn't wreck me right now. She does play differently. I don't find that particular restriction to be fun. That's just me. But I do really think that she's got obviously the coolest deck building. I've yet to really hear anyone put together a combo that's like so captivating that no one else can take. Because, when your ability is you can't play cards from a class unless you switch to that class, it kind of breaks a lot of combos. But I do really think the new tarot stuff is going to make me interested. Actually, when we get the full Blurst suite, I want to see what like Blurst Lola looks like, because I feel like she could pull together a cool combination of those Bless and Curse cards. So yeah, I think probably we need to do a Lola build, whether we do it maybe on Twitch and not so much on an actual episode of the podcast, or whether we devote another episode to Lola. How dare we? We're definitely going to do that. So thank you, Tim. Let's move on to the next one.
Hello there, this is Jason Barnett, and I wanted to say that my pet investigator is Finn Edwards. I love him because he's good at just getting going off the start. He doesn't need a whole lot of setup, and he's good at all the stats that do things for you in the main part of the game. Go and run around and grab clues really well. He can evade monsters without having to do a lot of setup with good evade stats. And he's even a capable fighter if you need to go down that path if you're going solo. But usually when I play him, he's more of like a flex slot for me in a group game. So, yeah, Finn Edwards, really good.
I agree.
For those of you who are not in our video chat right now, y'all should have seen Ian's face light up.
That is the correct choice, yes.
Yeah. Finn's great. I love Finn. I played him for Iron Man for Forgotten Age. He was awesome. I always like if there's an investigator with high intelligence and then a high other stat, doesn't matter what it is, I'll probably really enjoy him. And yeah, Finn was great. He was a lot of fun. The only thing that I keep tripping up with Finn is that he can't take all of the rogue cards. He can't take up to level 5 rogue. He can take up to level 5 illicit, but rogue he caps at like 3 or 4, doesn't he?
3.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the one thing that I keep forgetting about him, but it's not enough to sully my opinion of him though, by any measure.
I would be curious to pick MJ's brain on because there's Finn that does that. I'm trying to think, there's like one other investigator who caps out on their main class early, and I'd just be curious what kind of MJ's
Norman.
Well, he does super early. He never starts
earliest. The absolute earliest.
I'd be interested to know kind of. Oh yes, thank you. It's Marie, and they get they get another keyword or whatever to kind of compensate. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, Finn's good. Like Nick said, if you can hit the ground running with 4 intellect and 4 something else, plus that extra action to evade, like,
Yeah, despite some great investigators coming out recently, Finn is still my favorite. Yep, it's been a wild ride because, again, I've said this before on the podcast, but he's a character I really didn't care about in the Mythos before this game. And even when his card was first spoiled, I was like, man, whatever. And then as soon as I played him, then it was just love at first play. But it turns out I like to evade, and he gives an extra evade, so yeah, kind of makes sense.
It's pretty good. All right, let's hit the next one.
Hey, this is Chris M., one of the conglomeration of Chris's, also known as Maka on Discord. Just calling about the pet investigator that we have. For me, that's got to be Duke, Ashcan Pete and Duke. Mostly because I got into the game right after Dunwich dropped, and beyond the fact that it's a hobo with a dog, what's not to love? But he's the first investigator that I started playing after I really understood the rules and how to play the game. So he was the first one that I had some good success with, and then shortly thereafter, Dark Horse Duke came out, and so he's always going to have a special place for me. Now they just need to have a survivor shotgun so I can do the hobo with a shotgun build. Thanks.
Hobo with a shotgun definitely needs to exist.
Yeah, I remember. I remember when Dunwich first came out, and I had the cards, and I was doing what I'm doing right now, where I was sleeving and organizing my cards. And I remember looking at Ashcan Pete and reading his ability, and then reading Duke, and going, if I'm playing solo, why would I play anybody else? Like, he's so good solo, and he's got 5 splash from any other class, level 0, but so you can, I talked about earlier about versatility and reliability. Ashcan is one of the most versatile and reliable survivors, I think, even to this day. Like, he came out in the second cycle, but I still think he's one of the best survivors. I love him.
You definitely weren't the only person to have that reaction. I remember even into like Carcosa, there were people being like Ashcan OP. Like, why would you play anyone else? And he was very, very consistent very quickly at a time when our card pool was still very young and still building other investigators to have the same level of consistency. So I get it. I do think he's leveled out a bit, though. I think sure. He's got some really cool builds, like the Yaudle Desperate build is really cool. He plays around with a lot of the survivor discard things really well. The fact that the thing that everyone always forgets about Duke, and I say everyone, I'm including myself first and foremost, is that Ashcan's ability is discard a card, ready an asset. So, and he's got Dunwich Splash. So like that, like I feel like that is an unplumbed ability of his for the most part. I remember one of the first Ashcan builds that I built that I was like, yeah, I'm proud of this. I'm so smart. Was Ashcan with Renfield. Because being able to just chuck a card and crank Renfield twice a turn if you can get 2 Doom on him and just it's so fun. But yeah, great investigator.
He's one I haven't played in a while, kind of like we were talking about Roland earlier, but it's mostly because I prioritize playing the newer investigators. But yeah, I need to go back and play some Ashcan again. It's been a while.
Kind of similar to our Roland talk, Ian, I remember you bragging about your Battle Mage Duke deck. Like,
with Moonstone.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Like, what?
Now I can't remember what happened to that.
Yeah, like, of all the, like, and that's going back to the versatility of them. Like, that 5 Dunwich Splash, and especially in Survivor, you can do so much with that, with the Survivor tools that we have now. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I need to play some Ashcan again.
All right, let's listen to the last one here.
Hey, Mythos-busters. It's Bart calling from Western Canada, and I'm calling primarily because I felt really bad you guys didn't get many calls last time when you first put out the request for calls. So here I am. Great show. Love what you guys do. The energy's great, and I really love the Doctors Without Borders move that you guys have done. So 2 things. First, the pet investigator, I might as well answer that one. For me, I started out as a Leo Anderson fan. I still am. I think it's great how many allies he just burns through. It's quite a desperate, sad story, and that's one reason I love him. But I've been gravitating more, probably in reaction to that, to Rita Young, mainly because she requires almost zero assets out there, and she's just set up and there you go from round one. And she's a hilarious hoot to play as you kind of dig into the tricks and traps and all that kind of stuff. And I found most campaigns she's a big surprise. I did want to mention one thing about the Innsmouth conspiracy that you guys were talking about blessed tokens and that kind of stuff last time. I think for me, I don't mind it technically in this campaign, but my concern is when I saw the blessed tokens come in and I saw Sister Mary basically being reliant on blessed tokens, I remembered my bad experience with Masks of Nyarlathotep and Eldritch Horror, which I thought was a horrible expansion for a lot of reasons. And so we're now running into a situation where if you want to play an investigator like Sister Mary, you have to play with blessed tokens. And that's kind of eliminating a possibility. And maybe big whoop, who cares, pick somebody else. But it just feels like the beginning of bloat starting to sink into this game. And I'm a bit concerned that we're going to go down that road. The one advantage, I guess, that Arkham LCG has is that it's a little more modular. You can choose to include things or not. But it's still got my spidey sense tingling that, okay, we might be going down a path here that is not going to end well for anybody. So, which is probably typical for Arkham. So anyway, just some thoughts. Great show. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
So hang on. Let's wrap up the pet investigator discussion first, and then we'll touch on the potential mechanical bloat. So first of all, I think Ian has insidiously just infected the minds of our listeners somehow. We got
it's all
Finn
coming
and
together. I know. Yeah, Rita's my other fave. Obviously, another evade-heavy investigator. Someone that often a lot of people don't seem to have success with or rate a little lower. But for me, I've always had really great success with Rita, both solo and multiplayer.
Yeah, I've yet to click with her somehow. I don't know what I'm missing, but I do.
I played Rita in a couple games. I played Rita alongside Norman in Return to Dunwich as my Back to the Future campaign. That was a while ago. But yeah, she was really fun. I think I stopped that campaign more because I didn't care for Norman, not because I didn't care for Rita. Norman just is not my bag. But Rita's a lot of fun. But he also said Leo, and I love Leo, and I totally agree with him. That whole I mention all the time the revolving door of allies, and he brings up how it's like this tragic story. I really do. I think that's so cool. Having an investigator like that, where it's like, no, the point is to get him killed. Like, they're gonna just get the use out of him, shuffle him out, and get a new one out and play nice and quick. Tommy kind of does the same thing, but for some reason, Leo, being a guardian with rogue access and the specific allies that can bring, it's just such a fun combination. So,
yeah. Ian, like, if you actually had to throw behind one pet investigator at this point, who would you go for?
Why are you doing that to me, Sean? I think if I had to pick right now, gun to head, I would say Finn, just because he lives in Rogue, and I've played more Finn than Rita, so yeah, that's probably about where I would be. But my favorite Rita story is that for Circle Undone, I had 4 campaigns going on initially for TCU. That's about what I run for each campaign at first, like 4 different campaigns. And she was the only one that was actually successful. The other 3 failed in Before the Black Throne. So always something I go back to.
Nick, how about you? You're just not a favorites person?
Well, no, I think I would have to say Roland. Like,
still. To
this day, he's still a really strong, even though I haven't played him in a while, I still look at him and I feel that connection that I felt early on when the game came out. I just look at Roland and I'm like, God, stats are good, ability's good, card access is so good, Guardian Seeker, I love that combination. Mm-hmm. Such a fun combo because I like to be a more aggressive playstyle. Sure. If Roland were removed from the equation, I would probably say Luke. Because even some of my Roland builds, I started to get janky with it, like my whole, not the shotgun bullshit, but if we actually focus on a build that I put time and effort into to be successful at the game and not just at getting shotgun out, I think of Roland with my calling in favors, what's the Roland build that always would grab clues quickly, but also throw him back onto locations to activate different card abilities and just kind of keep dogpiling those different card effects. So I really kind of like janky builds, and Luke, you can do some really crazy stuff with Luke, and I absolutely love it. And I'm going to think back to Arkham Knights when I was playing Luke for our Depths of Yoth, or the Yeps of Doth game, and I realized, like, oh man, Vermis, Knowledge is Power, both of those in Luke, you can do some crazy shit with that, just because of his whole location bouncing. A lot of fun. So I'd say Luke is a second for me.
So you like off-class Seekers, essentially?
Yeah, I really do. If Seeker's the main class, I'm like, kind of wish I could do a bit more.
No, it's just so you can play Seeker cards and not get shamed. That's Seeker shamed. There's a lot of Seeker shaming going around the community nowadays. And of course, I'd go with Diana. I have a few pet investigator.
What?
Silas is already up there, but like, I do love to cancel, and I do love flexibility. So Diana hits both of those really hard. Okay, so now let's talk about Curse and Bless and what potentially that means for the game mechanically. I thought it was an interesting point to make. I do think there is some validity in, wouldn't it be great if Sister Mary like worked with Bless, but like didn't require that you be playing Bless, because her entire thing is like literally her ability is adding Bless tokens. But do you guys see that as potentially problematic in any way from a design standpoint?
I've only played Mary in a campaign where both investigators are playing with Bless and Curse. So it's hard for me to judge on the flip side of that. And like, or even to build a Mary deck that doesn't care about Bless tokens. Like, imagine doing that. Imagine building a Mary deck that just uses Mystic Axis and you don't care about Bless tokens. And those are just like icing on the cake. Like, I wonder if that would even be worth exploring. I guess I don't consider it a problem for the design of the game as a whole. Now, I think if we got 5 investigators in Innsmouth and all of them functioned in a way similar to Mary, where they all did something with Bless and Curse, then I think I would feel a bit more concerned. Because I guess then it's like, okay, there's no new investigators added to the pool unless you want to play with this token mechanic. You know what I mean? But the fact that Mary's the only one, I mean, she's the guardian, I kind of get the short end of the deal on that one. But even still, I guess I don't see it as big of an issue as what was brought up in the voicemail, but that could just be me.
Yeah, it's interesting because the idea of Curse and Bless is that it's release-wise sequestered to the cycle because you had to have it with the tokens. And ostensibly, for the most part, it is optional. There are a few effects in Innsmouth itself that at least puts curses in. I don't know if I've seen anything that adds blesses outside of player cards. But to tie an entire investigator to an optional mechanic like that, I'm trying to think, do we have any other instances of that? Like, there's no one that's tied to tarot, for instance. It was like the next thing I thought of.
Right. I think tarot is the only other one that was like the campaign introduces a new mechanic, not a mechanic, well, like a significant mechanic, almost like the bones of the game are being added to only on the player's side. And not only, but you know what I mean? Like primarily on the player's side. I can't think of any other cycle that brought something in like Bless Curse, like tarot.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, it's definitely, I can see where the concern comes from, and especially something in, like, when I think about Eldritch Horror or Arkham Horror 2nd Edition or any of these board games where you keep adding expansions And then there's definitely bloat because you have like suddenly 20 mechanics going on at once. And it's not something you can get away from unless you just kind of pull that expansion out. But a lot of the board games are just designed where it's all or nothing. Whereas in the card game, like was mentioned in the voicemail, it is more modular. So I don't feel that same sense of bloat because if I don't want to deal with Bless or Curse, I can just kind of choose not to play with those cards. Same with Tarot, same with Myriad. And so I just tend to welcome it because it's more fun stuff to play with. Like I talked earlier about playing with Bless decks and how much that revitalized, like Mateo, for example. So I don't see it so much. I think because even new like encounter mechanics, they just because of the way the game is designed, like they just kind of live within that cycle because they want players to just be able to have a core in that cycle only and play it. So it's not like the same kind of thing where it relies on players having access to everything at once. So I think it's okay. If there was going to be a cycle where there was bloat, maybe it would be Innsmouth because you have flood tokens now and key tokens and bless and curse and there's so many layers. But I feel like it's been handled in a way that it doesn't kind of have that same mental load as it might otherwise.
I'm just kind of curious, especially because you guys are designers. What do you think, because as a game goes on, you've got to add new things. Like you need mechanical interest as you expand on a game. So what do you think it is that pushes a new mechanical design into feeling bloaty, gimmicky, whatever label you wanna throw on it, where it feels almost like it's a bad appendage, right? I don't know. I don't know if I'm asking the question in a way that's understandable, but what do you think it is that kind of pushes a mechanic there?
That's tough. I think for me, the only time that I would be worried about a game mechanic becoming something to be concerned with is when it becomes so effective that you have to include it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Even if, like, let's say Bless, this is a terrible example, but let's say like the Bless tokens did +4 instead of +2, something like that. Like that's huge. And it kind of then becomes the situation where like, why would you not run Bless tokens if they were that big of a swing? You know what I mean? Or if they didn't reveal, if they were just a +2 and they didn't reveal another token. And so you as soon as you drew one, you knew you passed the test or whatever. Like, I don't know. It's a weird place because I have also never designed like an ongoing game like this that would suffer from potential bloat,
Sure.
But I guess I would see it like you want to preserve the original rhythm and flow and feeling of the game. You want to make sure that content that came out early in the game's life, for the most part, is still valid and is still something that players want to include. You don't want to make a card or a mechanic that then renders half of your core set obsolete. I guess to me, that's what I look for is maintaining that power balance. And obviously, Arkham cards have gotten more powerful as we've gone on, but also because of the way that investigators work, that also means that some older cards that maybe came out and were not powerful or, were skipped over by people, deck builders, are now suddenly worth a second look. I mean, mine goes to Barricade and how suddenly that is a card that sees use now. And for the longest time, we would joke about how it was a bad card and not worth playing. And now suddenly there are builds that make explicit use of Barricade and do so in a great way. So,
yeah, for me, I think when it starts getting into bloat territory is when these new mechanics start like retreading some of the same ground. And then it feels like you're just introducing complexity for complexity's sake. Like Tarot is new because we didn't get a new slot before. And Bless and Curse, we didn't have brand new tokens. But if suddenly we got like a surprise tokens or something, like a new type of token that you add to the chaos bag, then at that point it's like, okay, really, we're adding a whole new layer when we already have Bless and Curse tokens. We've already done that. Like, I think when you start retreading some of that ground, and also when it distracts too much from the like stuff that you do normally in the game, like getting clues, fighting, dealing with enemies. That's the core of the game. So like when we have keys in Innsmouth, it's another kind of little twist to what we're doing, but you're still ultimately getting clues to grab a key. Mm-hmm. But if suddenly the keys were a whole like other aspect of the game that you had to deal with that had nothing to do with the clues, it might feel like a little bit too much.
Yeah, imagine if there was like a player card or like an investigator that's like at the start during setup, put 3 random keys into play, one at a location. And then that investigator's whole shtick is that they have to find all 3 keys. And it's like, well, hang on. We got enemies over here. We need clues to advance the act. And you're over there playing solitaire. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about like past games I've played and where I've sort of felt the kind of mechanical bloat. And I think at least from a player perspective, for me, it's when a mechanic starts to feel intrusive, where like for whatever reason I don't enjoy it or don't enjoy the prevalence of it, and there's not really a way to play without it. Whether that be in a competitive game, like now it's just in the meta and now you have to engage with it, or I suppose in a cooperative game, it would be like, oh, it's part of this cycle, and now you have to deal with it. Blessed hasn't worried me, and it's worried me less and less as we continue to get the new cards. I think it is a mechanical risk, a design risk to design an entire investigator to deal with this new mechanic. That I think just was. I think Mary hits a spot for me that doesn't worry me too much, because even though her ability, it does unavoidably deal with Bless, if you don't want to engage with that at all, or like have cards in your deck that engage with it, you don't have to. It's literally just there are now better tokens in the bag. You can go on your merry way. Like if you even want to house rule it to just be like, I'm just not going to deal with Bless tokens, that's a handicap. You know, like, yeah, you can do that, and I don't think the police are coming for you. But yeah, as the Bless and Curse stuff continues to come out, I feel like it's a way more interesting way to make the Chaos Bag feel more dynamic, and also cool player card effects that play around with them too. But I don't know. I guess we'll keep an eye on it. That's for me what I'm looking at is like, does it feel intrusive? Does it snap me out of it somehow?
Sure.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone for calling in. That was a good round. Next round is going to be, what role do you like playing best and why? So what role within Arkham when you play, whether it's solo, you caveat it as you will, qualify it as you will. What role do you like playing best and why? What do you find to be the most fun and engaging? So call in to the Mythos Busters hotline with your answers. That's 203-493-6984 or 203-493-MYTH. We love hearing from you guys, so thanks everyone who called in. It's a really great way to add some new voices to the podcast, first of all, because we have our own perspectives and they change at the rate they change, but you guys get to hear other voices in the community on these issues. So please call in and we'll cover those on the next episode. All right, hopping out then to a little bit of patron news. Ian, what we got?
All right, we'll keep this high and tight. So Patreon stuff. So first off, thanks to our board members. That's Chris B, Chris H, and Chris M, our conglomeration of Chris's. Morton, Jared, Ian, Kyle, Philip, Dave, Abilio, Jesse, Chad, and Robert. Thanks so much, board members, for all that you do to support us. And a special shout out to a random patron this time around is to Stuart McCash. Thanks, Stuart, for your support as well. And other things, mythosmerch.com, so make sure you head over there. We've added some new merch items recently, including items based on the Live, Laugh, Love meme submission we got. Live, Laugh, Love, you can see it if you're watching in our channel right now on Sean's camera. And if you're just listening, you can imagine it. But those are great items that you can pick up there. And we do have a new job title this time around. So for Brian Schultz, the new job title for Brian is going to be Zoo Wrangler and Prosthetic Finger Artisan. Those are two hefty jobs.
And one creates the other.
Yeah. That is very true. That is very true. Yeah, if you're going to be wrangling Zoogs, you're going to need plenty of prosthetic fingers eventually. So, thanks, Brian, for your support. That's what we got.
Wonderful. Okay, news this week. Didn't have any. We'll just throw a quick reminder out to everyone to keep using that hashtag FFG Play and Share. Take pictures of your games and throw them out there. I think we're last I checked, we are very, very close to unlocking something. Surely we must have unlocked it at this point, but I don't know what it is. But anyway, keep throwing those out there. We can get some more cool promos and arts and whatnot. So let's move on to the main topic for tonight. We're going to talk about State of Play classes. So, kind of to preface here, this is honestly one of my favorite things to watch in a game that I feel is well designed. I'm not quite sure about you guys, but the player deck building and deck building and theory crafting is one of my favorite parts of any game. And good faction design is just such a big part of the conversations you have and the choices you get to make related to player deck building, and of course then playing. And I feel like I'm going to throw it out there. I feel like Arkham has had the best, no qualifiers, the best faction design of any game I've ever played.
I would agree, and I think one of the things that's distinguished it, because sometimes you have games where the class design is about like each faction or color or class, whatever it is, gets a piece of the pie that the other factions don't get to touch. Whereas Arkham is more like... Now I gotta keep going with this analogy. They all get to touch the same things, but in different ways and with different appendages. Like, I was about to say,
they all get to put a different thing in the pie.
Yep. I just gotta push that analogy forward. Nothing to do.
Well, there's our episode title, Appendage Pie.
But yeah, each class, and obviously this was less so at the beginning of the game, but it's developed more and more as each class has gotten its own ways to investigate and fight, which are or deal with the enemies, which are the two kind of core things you have to do in the game. So I like that aspect, especially in a cooperative and solo game. That I think that's the challenge of the class design, is how do you do that without just printing like the same effect over and over? How do you make it different for each class?
Mm-hmm. Nick, what do you feel like, just opening statements here, general state of class design in Arkham at this point?
I think we're in a great spot. Okay, so I think that now, and Innsmouth is probably the start of this, what will probably be like, I would consider the second phase of this LCG, is that everything up until Innsmouth, and maybe you could argue even before Dream Eaters, was that the classes were getting the tools, to piggyback on what Ian said, the tools to do everything in the game their own way. So Guardians can get clues, but all those clue cards have some sort of interaction with enemies, whether it's taking damage, defeating enemies, or just being present with enemies, that sort of thing. Rogues have ways to get clues and ways to deal with enemies that aren't the same as Guardian or Seeker. And same for Mystic, same for Survivors. So now we have a card pool that is large enough to where every class can fill those needs that the game requires of you. And so now, what I think, we're in this great spot where cycles can start to introduce things like Bless and Curse, introduce things that create new archetypes and new ways to build a deck, cause you to look at an existing investigator in a new light because of new cards that came out that they're not explicitly more powerful or less powerful than existing cards. A good example would be, what's the Bless related or curse related cancel card in Mystic?
Ward of Radiance.
Ward of Radiance versus Ward of Protection. Like, those two cards alone can exist in the same card pool, can be played at the same table, and still be, they offer two different ways to do the same thing based on what you're doing with your deck. And I feel like Arkham is now in this position, again, I think Innsmouth was the start of it, where we can see that. We can really see the exploration of new archetypes, because we have such a solid card base for each class from this point forward. So,
yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on what you said. I think every game that I've followed, as its card pool expands, there's a tipping point and you'll talk to different people, they might pin it at different spots in the life of the game, but there's a tipping point where in the early life of the game there are tried and true archetypes and very specific combos and staple cards that just generally go in decks, and you're just going to see them. If your Seeker shows up to the board, they're probably playing Milan, and you just expect that, and the card pool, while you might have some experimentation, generally feels a little bit more static. And then at some point, there's a tipping point where it's like, oh, there's new decks and new ideas popping up on the DB all the time, and I never thought of that. And, oh, cool, look at that. Let me take that idea and mod it into a different deck. And it I don't know, it just explodes at a certain point. And we've definitely hit that with Arkham. And I think I almost hazard to say, but I think that every investigator in the game is playable solo. Obviously, your mileage may vary. Some are better at it than others. But I think you could make an argument that the card pool's at a place where every class, regardless of their card access, could put together a viable solo deck.
Yeah, I would.
I saw you both make some faces, but then ultimately agree with me.
Yeah, because there's always, and a lot of that is based off of previous experience with me, where it's like I tried to play Investigator solo before the card pool was where it was now, and I had a bad experience, and I haven't gone back to try that Investigator solo.
Sure.
First one that sprang to mind for me was Zoe, which is silly because obviously by now we know that Zoe has a solo build, probably multiple. And we know that she's viable, but just because that was my experience was as soon as she came out, I tried her solo and I just fell flat, and I was like, well, she's not a solo investigator. She's the 3+ player investigator, which, no, I would agree with you that generally speaking, every investigator probably has at least one solo build.
Which is impressive because I don't know, Corset Dunwich days, you could really make that argument and have it hold much water.
Right.
All right, so let's bust into the classes here. Nick. Guardian, how it started versus how it's going.
Well, when Guardians started, they were the end-all, be-all of enemy management. Everybody wanted to be a Guardian when it came to dealing with enemies, and Guardians were literally the only way that you could easily take out 3+ health enemies without wasting a bunch of actions. Now, there's still, I would argue that there's still the leader when it comes to enemy management. Although I think that gap isn't as wide as it once was, obviously, for reasons we've discussed. But they have so many fun tricks to do other things, and not even fun tricks. They have a couple of fun investigators that aren't focused on enemy management and that are more support and more playing with the idea that the Guardian keeps people alive. Like, that's ultimately what it comes down to. We keep the team alive. Whether it started as dealing with enemies, but now it's removing horror with Carolyn, or it's filling that bag full of bless tokens with Mary. There's other Guardians out there now that do things that aren't just, hey, here's some more damage. Hey, there's some more damage, that sort of thing. I really love seeing Guardians' growth, and that's, I think, when I said earlier about I'm excited for new deck archetypes, I think Guardians the one I'm the most excited for, because I feel like even though they have grown a lot, it all still comes down to, all right, well, what's the big gun that you're running in this deck? Okay, what's the way that you're going to get clues when there's no enemies on the board? That sort of thing. They're really, I feel like other than, again, Carolyn and Mary, there aren't a lot of different varied archetypes. It's just, what's your arsenal, so.
Sure. I think definitely, as far as killing enemies go, Guardian leads the pack. I would argue that enemy management means a wider variety of things nowadays than it did in the past, which is really cool. And I do think weapon selection is important, but I have run a fair few decks where you can go with the smaller weapons and then supplementing with events and skills and whatnot. It can be super viable. If you haven't played Gunslinger Mark yet, would recommend get those level 2 Colts and throw in the events that spend ammo and just go nuts, and it's very
that's
fun.
What you mean by Gunslinger Mark. I thought you just meant, hey, if you haven't played the most Guardian of any Guardian build ever, that Guardian
with the Guardian cards,
play Mark, but here's the twist: add guns.
Yeah, that's a pretty plebe take.
That does sound pretty fun, though, to just like quick draw the 6-shooter out, empty its ammo through events, and just using it, throw it back, pull it out again. That does sound like a lot of fun, though. I haven't done that.
Phylon Gun is great card. Who knew? Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
For Guardian, I think one of the things we talked about very early on in Mythos Busters, we kept talking about this like mythical Guardian tank deck, where you could tank enemies, but the problem at the time was because most Guardians have low sanity and there wasn't a lot of soaks or options back then. You couldn't really do that, but now it's totally possible. You have people like Tommy. You have Leo who spams out allies you can use to soak. There's cards like Spiritual Resolve. There's both options for assets you can put out to soak both damage and horror. Like you can totally build just a super tank. And then cards that let you attack enemies back when they attack you, like Counterpunch and Survival Knife. So I think that's one archetype that I haven't fully explored yet, just a complete tank, but that's something that's actually developed, I think, now.
That's also an archetype that's hard to explore unless you're playing 3 or 4 players. Like, I don't think a dedicated tank build would work. Yeah, would work in fewer than 3 players, so.
Yeah. I also think it brings on one of the more unique tactical styles. Because I don't think really any other class does this as much as I do it in Guardian. When you're playing with pulling enemies off of other players and moving 2 enemies to kill them, and potentially if you're doing stuff with tanks where you're like deliberately taking attacks, positioning becomes the name of the game. It's like where am I starting? Where am I ending? How many actions do I have? Can I squeeze extra damage out here? And I think that that really type of, I suppose, just like tactical positioning is kind of the hallmark of Guardian more than any other class, which I find to be quite fun.
Yeah, which I think Roland was a good trainer Guardian in that respect, because he teaches you early on to know where you're going to be at in the Mythos phase, because you want to be able to have an enemy on a location with a clue. But I feel like that's something I'm still trying to work on to this day, is remembering positioning for the Mythos phase. But it's one of those important things. And I think the other thing I'll say about Guardian is Nathaniel Cho has come out recently, who's maybe my favorite Guardian now, and it is because it gets away from a little bit of that get big guns out and blow stuff away. It's like a whole other way of playing, dealing damage with events. And I know I had this discussion in our Patreon channel recently about, well, what do you do when he runs out of events to play and solutions for that? Which is totally thematic. Like, he's a boxer, he runs out of gas eventually and he's tired. Needs to do a little rest, but yeah, so that's a fun Guardian to play if you want something different.
Yeah. What do you guys think about like clue acquisition in Guardians nowadays? I think I'll start probably by design. They have the hardest time.
They can. I actually really like, I didn't feel, okay, so Scene of the Crime, I think was our first, no, Evidence was our first one, which is just Roland light, And I was like, okay, sure, but it pretty quickly I stopped running Evidence, just because there were better, and I harp on this all the time, and I think it's true now for every class, but 30 cards isn't a lot. You need to make sure you're getting the most out of every card, and Evidence was one that I just wasn't using that often.
A whole event for one clue better be really cheap and easy to play.
Exactly. And then we got Scene of the Crime, which was great. Scene of the Crime is awesome. Still use it all the time. But it's also one of those where if you're at a location, and what is it? If there's an enemy there, you get 2 clues. Otherwise, you just get 1. Is that how it works? Yeah. There's so many times when I'm like sitting on it and there's no enemies in play, and I'm like, I want to just use it, but I want to wait for the best opportunity to use it, that sort of thing. But then when Nathaniel Cho came out and he gave us upgraded Evidence, and he gave us that other experienced one, Lesson Learned.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, like, thank you. So Guardian, I think there's still room to grow in clue acquisition, but I'm also pretty happy with the few tools that they have. And those are just the events. Like, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that gives them, oh yeah, there's agency backup, there's Greta, there's there's tons of tools out there. So
there's Greta, which is Roland on a stick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think Ally is where they've really grown a lot through. So you have Lexley, who the ability doesn't necessarily help you get clues, but the passive intellect boost is a reason I often take her in solo Guardian, just for that alone. But yeah, with Greta, that ability. So, and again, usually in multiplayer, you're probably not worrying about that too much. You can usually throw in like Scene of the Crime and one other effect and be okay if you're not playing with a hard cleaver. But in solo, I think there's enough that you can make your way. And again, that's just within Guardian. Obviously, when you look at off-class options, then it opens up a lot.
Yeah, I'm looking at like Nathaniel and Mark are the only ones who don't have off-class clue acquisition and have to figure something else out. And then Mark's got Sophie, so like, who cares?
Yeah, Mark's got +2 to any skill anytime. Like
he's doing all right. He's all right. He's pretty okay. The joke used to be, take Mark solo, but then like any of us who actually tried it was like, yeah, this is actually all right.
I think that was a joke that was only funny until he released, And then once people got him, they're like, oh yeah, he's really good.
Okay. How about like Mythos play, like defending your board, withstanding the Mythos phase? How do you think Guardian falls there?
Guardian, from my memory, all of Guardian's tools that are like Mythos control, they still require you to deal with the card. Like, you don't just ever get a straight up cancel in Guardian, if I remember right.
Just damage and horror, I think, is the only thing that can actually be canceled.
Right, yeah. But they don't ever get you. You can't ever just can't.
Just the one.
But fool me once, you still have to finish the card.
That's true.
Yep. So all of them require the Guardian, as far as I can remember, I could be wrong, require the Guardian to still meet that challenge and deal with it, whether it's success or fail. And then the effects will come in. So then there's First Watch, which lets you mitigate who gets what. There's, Fool Me Once. That's Eat Lead is the only really thing they have for token control, which, like, that even now, like, I didn't like that card when it came out, and even now I'm like, some builds maybe. But again, Gunslinger Mark. Yeah. So Guardian still requires you to be brave and take that Mythos on the chin and then kind of deal with the aftermath of it. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think their Mythos control cards are, I think that's the fun aspect of it, because you can't just cancel it. You have to be a little bit more creative and like, I'm going to go on the hunt, and usually players aren't wanting to go look for enemies, but you're actually kind of totally flipping that and actually going to hunt for enemies instead. I feel like this is kind of a cop-out answer, but my favorite form of Mythos control in the Guardian is playing Zoe. That's one of the reasons why I like playing Zoe.
It's just the 4-will.
Because it's 4-will. Like, that's why it's one of my, like, frustration teams. When I get mad at a scenario and just want to blast it, I bring out Wendy and Zoe, and they just kind of are able to handle everything.
Just kind of pass everything.
And also the new upgraded Holy Rosary, which is in Guardian.
Yeah.
The upgraded version is, forget even just the blessed token aspect of it, which is nice, of course, but having the extra will and a sanity soak is great.
That's not nothing.
I keep forgetting about I love what that means for the game as a whole, that we can see a card exist in one class and then the upgraded version be a totally different class.
I really hope we see more of that.
Yes.
Get more cross-class things going on. And then I suppose the other real hallmark of Guardian is I feel like they are the most... They are the class that has the most specifically cooperative and multiplayer effects. And, particularly with, like, support, but also pull an enemy off of another player, or things like Stand Together, where literally you can't play it if you can't choose another investigator.
Yep.
And for a game that I would argue is a multiplayer game with solo rules, I don't know. I tend to play support in team-based games, so I really do like that there's a class that excels at that piece of it.
I don't like supporting other players. So I have
Thanks, Rogue. Found the Rogue. All right. Well, any final thoughts on on Guardians? Maybe a good way to close these is like, okay, what of your memory? What are some of your favorite or most iconic builds or decks that you've or archetypes, whatever you'd prefer to answer there. I'll go first. For me, like the most Guardian of Guardian, like just murder mark, just draw cards and kill things is still like, if I just want to play killer Guardian, that's what I'm reaching for.
Yeah.
So good.
I'm going to say this one because I think Ian might say something very similar. But I called it Block Party Zoe when I ran it first, and that's Zoe with the flamethrower and agency backup with charisma, so I could get another agency backup out. And it's literally just spread everything around. I'm gonna do as much as I can to as many things as I can at once. Like, we're just gonna have fun. Party's over here, everybody. I loved it. I love flamethrower is such a fun weapon under very specific circumstances.
Yeah, I think in addition to Zoe and Nathaniel, who I mentioned already, my Eternal Flamethrower Mark build, once it gets going, never running out of flamethrower, you're basically set for combat. Like, what else do you need? And I don't know if it's iconic yet, but I have had a lot of fun playing with Sister Mary Bless, which when I first saw a 3-combat Guardian, I was like, what? I've actually ran her as main killer, and she's done some work. So
yeah,
so it's fun. It's good.
You got to work for it a little bit more because three is
set up.
It's tenuous.
It's what you play when you're tired of just throwing guns on the board and having it easy. Yeah, make yourself work for it a little.
It's when you want to play hard mode, but still with the standard chaos bag.
All right, well, let's get the easy one out of the way next. Seekers.
They are a class.
Yellow's generally good in any FFG game. If you want to play the good class, go play yellow. That said, I do think that the space between Seeker clue acquisition and everyone else's clue acquisition is not as large as a lot of people would like to argue that it is. But it is there.
Yeah.
I will acknowledge that it's there.
A lot of more recent Seeker cards have given you different ways to get clues with things like whatever the research card is that costs 10, but it's -1.
Research.
Extensive research. Stuff like that. Or they give you... or they just give you different things to do that aren't necessarily clue related in Seeker. And then other classes have been getting those clue cards like we talked about. So yeah, that gap is narrowing. But there is still a lot of ground to make up.
Yeah, similar to what we talked about with Guardian, where that gap is narrowed in terms of enemy management. Same with Seeker, but the Seekers can still put out the most ridiculous builds where they just kind of hoover up the clues from locations. But I mean, it's just a thing. People have different feelings about it, but when clue progression is the victory condition of Arkham, the class that focuses on the victory condition is just gonna be strong. Like, that's just reality. Like, because things were designed that way, whoever can get to the victory condition fast is going to have a little bit of an edge. And to me, that's okay. Like, there's other aspects when we get in talking about card draw that maybe are a little more iffy, but as far as that goes, like, yeah, they're just always going to be the strongest cloovers, and that's okay.
Yeah, and from a thematic standpoint, it makes sense, and from the standpoint of who are, iconic and strong protagonists in Mythos stories, maybe not necessarily actual Lovecraft stories, because that's just a horror show. But Seeker, I'm fine with the fact that Seekers can just get clues the best. I think the game has done a pretty decent job of not just letting them go ham. Things like something as small as fingerprint kit, exhausting to get used.
Yes.
things like that. That's not to say there aren't crazy builds out there that can do crazy things, but I don't know. They're definitely good at it. We'll go with that.
Yeah, so it's such a hard design balance because when you're designing cards, like you want to give a class things so that they can do what they do better. Like with Guardians, you give them stuff to deal more damage. Well, with Seekers, you give them stuff to find clues faster. But hey, that turns out to be really powerful. So, like we saw with Rex, you got to limit that a little bit, or because if you can't get too many clues too fast. I think all the Tesla's clue stuff is another place where it's great having those options because they're super useful. But then if you have too many Tesla's clues, then you're kind of taking the chaos bag out of the game.
Right.
Which you don't want to do.
Every so often you get a scenario like the Last King in Carcosa where it's like, hey, what do? You get clues from locations? Ha! Not now you don't! Play the game, you loser! So that's not me. That's not me talking down Seekers. That's me. Mm-hmm. How I feel every time I go back to Last King, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I gotta right. actually go talk to people.
It was a very solid MJ impression. That's what I hear in my head. And kind of taking the other side of that coin, obviously with being very good at clue acquisition, Seekers have traditionally struggled or had to work harder for enemy management. I would say that was way, way true in the early life of the game. Remember like how big a freaking deal it was when I've Got a Plan came out?
Oh my god. damage acceleration in Seeker was huge, and that was the only way to do it, so everybody had it.
It was such a big deal. It was like, oh my god, you can play Seeker solo now. Obviously, it's not quite that bad. A lot of the Seekers have stuff they can pull in from off class. But between Strange Solution, I've Got a Plan, Occult Incantation is the new one that's pretty good as long as you can draw cards, which most Seekers can. Mm-hmm. I feel like probably Strange Solution aside, Seekers are pretty well balanced on how hard they have to reach to like really deal with enemies.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it was really rough initially to try to run solo Seeker. Like the enemy management was terrible, and I think sometimes people forget just how bad it was. And Seeker really needed more enemy management tools because not being able to play it solo at all was kind of annoying. And then you throw in these cards like Strange Solution and Occult Invocation, and suddenly Seekers are dealing crazy damage. So yeah, again, I feel like it's a hard thing to balance, but I feel pretty good about where the options now are in terms of damage, where I wouldn't necessarily want to just say, okay, I'm going to run a Seeker like killer build, like they're not going to put out the same output as Guardian. In general, unless you do some degenerate things, which is always possible. But otherwise, yeah, I think I'm glad at least to have those enemy management options there.
Yeah, and also with Seeker too, like their good enemy management stuff, it's all experience. Other than I've Got a Plan, which I mean that costs 3. So
yeah, and Occult Invocation, but and even with I've Got a Plan, like you got to time it right. Like if you pop an agenda by spending your clue, or you pop an act by spending your clues, and that act makes an enemy come out, then all of a sudden your I've Got a Plan is
you have no plan.
Not good.
Yeah. So I mean, all their stuff is tied to experience, so you still have to work for it. And yeah, like you guys mentioned, the side quest cards, as we call them. I feel good about Seeker's enemy management being like, it has its own identity in a way, and they're not really infringing on how other classes deal with enemies. So,
although taking Vicious Blow and Amanda can do some very special things. I will say.
Yeah, Amanda's a special case.
Yeah.
Okay. How about kind of Mythos control and surviving the Mythos phase, that sort of thing. We got Forewarned.
Yeah, there's Forewarned.
There's
Eye of Truth.
Eye of Truth, sure. There's Malison, like if you can spare the ally slot as a decent option there. I feel like Seekers aren't necessarily the most resilient.
No.
They're definitely more vulnerable to like damaging effects and agility tests as a group, outside of like Ursula.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like the Mythos phase is pretty decent at keeping Seekers in check for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's not... I feel like I don't spend a ton of time in Seeker building around Mythos control for that reason, unless it is Malison, because it's almost... like, not to say those cards we do have aren't good, but I just tend to just lean into just trying to advance through the game faster and not worry too much about it.
Yeah, they're the rush faction.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Yeah, I think the only time I've ever used Forewarned is in that Roland build I talked about earlier. That's okay putting clues back on locations, because that's what Forewarned does. So, whereas if I'm doing just a straight Seeker build, I'm like, no, these are my clues. I don't want to spend them.
I think the other thing you have to think about with Seeker, it's not necessarily Mythos control, but just like another kind of wrinkle is like location effects that call for like agility or combat tests, especially when you're playing solo Seeker. Sometimes need an option. Usually that's mind over matter. Yep. So you can substitute your intellect. And beyond that, it's just really pitching a lot of icons and making sure you have icons for those kind of tests.
Yeah, there were some locations in Devourer Below that really kind of put Seekers in a tough spot. Like, think about back, especially in that stage of the game, like when it was just the core set. And yeah, Devourer Below, it's like, this one you investigate using will. This location you investigate using combat. And Seekers are like, okay.
Oh, what now?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Now, it is probably worth mentioning that the Seekers are definitely the class I feel that runs most afoul of the taboo list since that came to be.
Yeah, that is true.
But I do feel like those adjustments have been warranted, and I feel like the taboo list has done a really good job of weaning people off of those auto includes that were just in literally every deck.
Yeah.
I still have not played a whole lot with the Necronomicon, so I can't really speak to that one either pre or post taboo.
Same.
Because it got tabooed like as soon as it was released.
Yeah, because I never even got a chance to use it, pre-taboo.
Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with kind of the other piece of Seekers, which is that card draw piece, which they are the card draw class. They are the best at drawing cards overall, although other classes have gotten more and more card draw options, thankfully. And it's just one of those things where you pair the class that has the best tools for getting the victory condition clues with probably the best effect you can have in a card game, which is drawing cards.
Who knew?
You put those two together, you got a stew going. You're just going to have a powerful class. I think there are some things that pull in this game's favor compared to other games, like the fact that in general, you have to spend actions to do things, and so it's gated a little bit compared to something like Lord of the Rings, let's say. But players have stumbled upon a few combos, which almost every single degenerate combo I've seen in this game has revolved around drawing through your deck and then doing weird things with like a 5-card deck, like almost every single one. So at the end of the day, it's not like there's a broad range of things that get abused in this game. It just really comes down to that one particular trick.
Now, as far as identity goes, do you guys find it cool, sad, or somewhere in between that Seekers are the only ones that get like the side quest ones that we were talking about, Strange Solutions? There's actually like the upgrade path that has a specific objective for you to fulfill within the player deck as opposed to within the encounter deck of the scenario. Is it okay? Do you guys offended at all that Seekers have the monopoly on that?
Not at all. I think it's cool. I think it fits Seeker as a class. Like, if Guardian had something where it was like, you can't include this gun until you empty the ammo of this weaker gun. I think that it fits so well with Seeker that it makes sense, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it needs to exist in other classes. If it did, I don't think I'd have a problem with it, but I also don't have a problem with it being limited.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's just their particular thing, their particular shtick. Like, the classes each kind of have their own things they have to think about when upgrading, and that's their thing. Mm-hmm. And I like, you know, it makes sense that these seeker thinky types take time to research and find these answers to their questions, and thinking about which ones you're gonna take have opened up lots of different options. Sometimes I wish that the options that we got were, I don't know how to put it. Like, sometimes the options kind of boil down to like damage things or get clues. And sometimes I wish the side quest rewards that we got were maybe something else, like something a little bit weird to play with. But yeah, that would be my only gripe, I think.
Yeah, some of them feel a little narrow sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it there's something to be said for the fact that, like we talked about, Seekers go really fast. They get that victory condition pretty quick, generally. So it makes sense that some of their stronger card effects are kind of locked behind things that take you away from just pushing hard towards victory. They force you to do a 1 or 3 or 5 or however many other actions. Strange Solution, I think, is the quickest one. You just need one test. Right? Is that what that one is? I can't remember. I never run them, so I don't remember. But yeah, like they pull you away from the main rhythm of the game to do something else for a little bit that eventually you'll be able to then upgrade it into a powerful effect. So I think it fits.
Yep.
What are some of the iconic Seeker builds that you guys would call mention to that feel very Seekery to you?
Big Hand Harvey.
Yep.
It's definitely something that's come out more recently, but this idea of like filling up your hand and rolling with that. I have a harder time with this one because Seeker is probably my least played class overall, although I have played a fair bit of Seeker just compared to the rest. But I think one that is iconic that I always want to play with more is the tome stuff.
Sure.
It's the aspect of Seeker that isn't as straightforward as the rest, like playing around with these books. It is more of the weird stuff, and some of the allies we've gotten that play with like switching the books around. Like that's a build I want to explore more because that's a way to make Seeker interesting for me, I think.
Can confirm, really fun. Yeah, and to that end, like Daisy is still like, if I think Seeker, I know she's core set, so she left an impression by default, but just that ability to, like, with Old Book of Lore and now all the new ones that we have out, she's got Mystic Splash, which, you know, a lot of Seeker really feels like delving too deep and seeking out knowledge that you ought not be seeking, so that it pairs really well with Mystic. But yeah, I think the Odd Duck is kind of Joe, right? Like, where he actually does a bit of fighting.
Yeah, Joe's fine. I think the reason I haven't played him more is because I always feel like my deck, I call it the insight deck, but what is it actually called?
Hunch.
The hunch deck. I feel like I just use the same hunch deck every single time because it's just the same cards that are like the best choice. But maybe I need to try them again. Maybe there's some new insights that have come out that can shake things up.
I was just going to say, I too have a hard time figuring out exactly how to engage with the hunch deck in a way that feels satisfying.
I remember when Harvey came out, I pulled a couple from his starter deck and like, oh my god, the one, every class has it. For Seeker, it's Investigate, you gain 2 resources. Or like when this action begins,
burning the midnight oil.
Burning the midnight oil. Like that one I put in there because if it comes up, I'm like, well, I was going to investigate anyway, so sure, let's do it. You know. So, but yeah, the hunch deck is the weird part of Joe. But at the same time, those are also extra cards. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a Sister Mary situation where, like, if the card comes up on your hunch deck and you're like, there's no way I'm going to use that this turn, I don't necessarily feel bad letting that get shuffled back in. It's when it's like 3 turns in a row, I'm like, oh, come on. Like, where's that shortcut
when it's your
that I put in
friggin'
there?
weakness, and it's, of course, it's the turn when you start with an enemy engaged with you and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's true, too.
Not bitter or salty about that at all.
I really do like Joe, though. I like him a lot, and probably just because he's the inverse of Roland. I don't think that a Roland and Joe 2-player campaign would go well, though.
Oh, really?
I think
challenge
they would
accepted.
I think they would struggle with the Mythos. I think they'd struggle with the encounter deck, and I could be very wrong, but just looking at the two of them, I'm like, I'd want some sort of buffer against the encounter deck between the two of them. Although, again, maybe now at this point in the card pool, maybe they'd be fine. I don't know.
An important agility test would stop them cold, I think.
Yes, yeah.
You'd be sitting there throwing themselves over the gap in the building repeatedly and just never make it to the other side.
Just keep smashing it. I think the Seeker build I always have my eye on that I try again every couple cycles is Ursula and Relic. Because Ursula is just a good investigator, but it's the Relic piece that doesn't get touched a lot, so... Always gotta come back to it when more relics come out.
Probably worth it mentioning the Ursula Rush solo build, because that thing is just like, you want to speed run anything, it is with that build or something very close to it.
Gosh, Ursula is kind of like the opposite of Mateo, where like Mateo came out and he was a trait, limited deck, or not trait limited, but he was a trait build deck, and it was like, gosh, there's like, if there were more bless cards, Mateo might feel really good. And Ursula comes out and she's a trait one as well. But you're like, she's so good, we don't need relics. Like, leave them alone, dude. We don't need them. Just put a bunch of yellow in there. You're good.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Let's move then to Survivor. Are they next? Or is it Rogue? I always forget the class order.
Rogue would be next. Rogue.
Well, Ian, what do you think? What's the state of Rogue right now?
My time has come. I think as far as where we've been and where we are now, I think where Rogue started was really at a place where the level 0 cards were not great and the XP options were really good. And that's kind of been the path that Rogue has taken, that over time we've gotten better level 0 options and we've continued to get really good XP options. So there's still a class where you end up spending a lot of XP and there's a lot of different ways you can go, but thankfully there's been more and more level 0 options so that your first couple scenarios you have a better time. And I think when thinking about enemy management and clue progression, I think it was really the clue piece that Rogue struggled with at first, because in terms of enemy management, there was always the evade option, and they are generally the best class at evading and handling enemies that way. But then we got Streetwise, of course. We got Lockpicks eventually.
Lockpicks were so useful.
Yeah, Lockpicks was huge. Lola was huge. And so those have just gotten Rogues to a place where they can kind of hold their weight in terms of both clues and enemies.
Agree. I think that the high risk, high reward, pour everything into a single test archetype has only been reinforced. Obviously, losing Double or Nothing to the taboo list was a bit of a thing. But I don't know. Like, I know we said it at the time. I feel like if you're playing solo, like, Double or Nothing's an absolutely fine card. It was the high end coordination stuff that really got silly. But I will continue to say that, like, no one will fail fantastically. No one will, like, do a double backflip, cartwheel 3 times and then belly flop at the end of it. Then, like, a rogue who commits all these things and then pulls the tentacle. Like, no one does it as fantastically.
It's funny, though, because it's kind of developed in 2 ways. Like, you have the, like, all-out YOLO style of committing everything. But then the other side of getting things testlessly by just paying for it has also been developed. So you have those two routes you can go, or you can do both at once if you want. But like when you have intel report, to just pay for clues, Lola and Delilah for paying for clues or damage. Like there's all these options where you just kind of pay and avoid the chaos bag altogether.
I think Rogue was probably the first instance that we actually saw the beginnings of an archetype with the succeed by 2 or more. Is that right? At least that's what I think. Because that was in the Dunwich box, I think, was where we saw the first couple of cards.
There was Opportunist, if you want to throw
but that was a 3-year... That's the weird one.
We try to forget about Opportunist.
Yeah.
You know, between the core set and Winnie coming out, we've just forgotten about Opportunist entirely. So we've talked about like Guardian and Seeker, and I think those ones are very easy because they have a very distinct specialty and they have a very distinct weakness, and you know it's interesting to talk about how that's been handled as well. But I feel like with the other 3 classes, it's way more about like what does it feel like to be doing the other things, because even from the get-go, all the other classes had an ability to do all of the things. They just had a very distinct way of getting there. And with Rogue, it's kind of with the flashy abilities. I feel like they've always been better at investigation than at like straight killing things. And you know the trade-off there was then they also were really good at evading. So you know agility and intellect kind of are their core stats, right? If such a thing can ever be claimed.
Oh, and see, I always thought that they did better at the enemy management because Rogue has access to so many weapons.
Yeah, I suppose you could definitely say that now, and it was probably true in the core set because Skids had Guardian access.
Well, I mean, we had Derringer. Switchblade was in the core set, right?
Switchblade was Dunwich, I think.
Level 0 was?
I think Switchblade is core set.
I thought it was too.
Okay,
yeah.
all right, I might be wrong.
But yeah, when I think of Rogue, like when I think of enemy management Rogue, a whole list of weapons comes to mind. When I think of clue gathering Rogue, I think of like 4 cards. You know what I mean? Or like 3 cards. So, but that's my perception. That's just, I think, a good example of how good Rogue is as flex.
Right.
Like Rogue will, if you're playing a 3-player game and your 3rd player is Rogue, nobody's going to be sad to see it, regardless of the build, unless it's some Ace of Rods, Council Coffers bullshit. I wasn't.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, and I think going back to the question of how does it feel to do these things, like in enemy management, it feels differently than Guardian to deal with enemies, unless you're Tony. He does Guardian things pretty much, just kill things. But otherwise, because you have that evade strategy, it's also different from Seeker, where their solutions are more temporary. Like you play an event, like you always have your agility stat, you always have an evade option, but it's just more about being more selective, like when you're going to evade and when you're going to kill something. That choice becomes very important in Rogue, and learning that skill, learning how to evade and position to get the things you need if an enemy has Hunter. Like those are all things that become important when thinking about enemy management.
Yeah. So, I'm kind of looking at the list here, and it was funny because I'm looking through the list of investigators for each class as we do this. As I was looking through Guardian, like Nick, you alluded to, a lot of it's like, okay, well, what do I kill with? What are my guns? What's my loadout? Is kind of like the main thing you think about for building and playing. Same thing for Seeker. It's like, okay, how am I getting clues? What does that loadout look like? And how does that affect each of the investigators? And I feel like in a way it makes them play more similarly than now. I'm looking at Rogue and I'm like, wow, every one of these I feel like kind of pulls you in a different direction. You've got your Finn, which is going to be very like fast and furious and evadey, and then you've got like Jenny and Preston, which in their own ways kind of push you into, hey, do things with money. You've got Safina, she's a mystic in green clothing, right? Skids, I'm still not sure about.
Well, and not only the investigators, but you look at just the big XP cards. Like, it's like, okay, is this a golden pocket watch build, or is this a Chicago typewriter build? Is this whatever? What's the click? What's the click one? The one where you stack actions.
Borrowed time.
Borrowed time. Is this a borrowed time build, or is it a double hot streak and and streetwise build? Like Rogue, yeah, you say Guardian has guns, Seeker has clues. Rogue is just like their big XP toys. I think are more varied than, and you like Guardian tried to get a little varied with it with like Armor of Ardennes and Monster Slayer, but for the XP, the guns were always a more reliable option. So you never took Armor of Ardennes and you never took Monster Slayer. You just took a shotgun. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other part of Rogues we haven't talked about yet, shockingly, which is kind of one of their main things, is getting extra actions.
Oh, yeah.
Even from the core set with Skids, Quick Thinking, the aforementioned Borrowed Time, Ace in the Hole. Like, there's just so many different... And, of course, like, some of the investigators give you extra actions. So just that idea of you can keep throwing actions at stuff to make things happen is a fun part of playing Rogue.
Yeah. And then you can run Payday and gain, like, 6 resources in one turn.
Yeah, and then I think the other big thing is God, I don't know. Well, we'll save that for closing statements. Okay, so Rogue, I think another one of their big identities is that they generally struggle a little bit more in the Mythos phase and are more susceptible to your Frozen in Fears and and whatnot. Like Frozen in Fear in the core set was basically just anti-skids tech for the encounter deck, right?
It still kind of is.
So, very, very similar to Seeker, a rogue will seek to just be fast and do what you can before the encounter deck has its chance to wear you down. Because it's going to swing harder, but ideally you can get more done in the meantime.
Yeah. And you want to be able to bounce back really well, too, which I think Rogue is pretty good at for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where those extra actions come in. Really, where you're going to get hurt is either like the will test on a treachery that stays in your threat area, like Frozen in Fear and many others, or like horror dealing, especially if you're like a lower sanity one. But yeah, in general, you just take it on the chin. Or you include like some will icons that you are going to commit to specific treacheries. But really, yeah, you're just playing through it for the most part.
So any favorite like archetypes or builds? Like I'm trying to think here. Preston to me is like the first rogue that really activated something for me in a long time. Like Rogue, I appreciate. It's that class for me where like I totally appreciate what it's doing. I see certain investigators and like Winnie is one that I really love. But for the most part, like Rogue is actually my least played class just because reasons. But Preston was the first one who was like, wow, that is such a different identity for an investigator. And it's so rogue. And it lets you build and play in a way that no other investigator can, where you literally are just throwing money at problems. So like as far as like iconic builds, Preston and Winnie are the ones for me that stick out recently, where it's just like yeah, rogue.
I really like we talked about actions and I mentioned Payday. I really like I forgot that borrowed time skids. I really like playing a skids deck that's just like, all right, how many actions are you guys taking a turn? 3? Well, I'm going to take 5 this turn. Next turn, I'm going to take 6. And then I'll take 3 the turn after. You know, I love that where it's just like, I'm not great at any one thing, but if I keep throwing actions at it, eventually I'll get through. And with things like borrowed time, and then you make use of it for the enemy side of it with like Chicago Typewriter and being able to pour actions into that. I think that's a really fun build to do. So,
I have so many, but I don't want to go on too long. Of course, I got to shout out Finn paired with Lola and various clue tools. It's very similar to the solo Ursula build where you just blitz through scenarios before they can do anything to you. That's probably my most played deck in Arkham, and have pretty much been able to defeat most campaigns with that. Tony is one we haven't talked a ton about, but Tony with things like Garrottwire and Delilah, like you can just pile on crazy amounts of damage. He's someone who can like act like a guardian basically. And then the last one that I would really shout out is running out of my brain because I can't remember now. But that's okay. Yeah, it just ran away, but that's okay.
Fair enough.
It succeeded its agility test.
Successfully evaded.
Yep.
All right. So then moving to Mystic. So I guess I'll preface here. Mystic is a very, very interesting class in that very, very much from the beginning. It was like, hey, remember all those other stats? They don't matter. Just everything's willpower. So it kind of became, at least in the beginning of the game, a matter of being a very slow build class because you couldn't just start taking tests out of the gate. You had to get a kit rolling. But it compensated for that in that so much of what the encounter deck chops away at you with is willpower tests, and Mystics are just going to hit those.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Mystic in the beginning struggled a lot for diversity because there was only one Shriveling, and like Rite of Seeking didn't come out until Dunwich, so the entire core set experience for Agnes was like, how do I actually get enough things together to get clues? Mm-hmm. Versus now, where there are so many options in so many directions and so many different flavors of cards that do the same things that like your Shrivelings and your Rite of Seekings did. That I, for our first hotline question, I was like, why is Mystic the most flexible class? Because I honestly think it is. You can take that willpower stat for most Mystics and bend it in any direction. And at the cost of just having to pull the right pieces together, which isn't that hard anymore, you can do some crazily efficient things.
Yeah, I remember early on thinking like, well, gosh, okay, so we have a spell that uses will to do damage. We have a spell that uses will to get clues, and we have a spell that uses will to evade. What's next? And it turns out we have like 3 or 4 suites of spells like that, but they all do it differently enough to where one of them is going to be the right choice depending on the build you're going for. And I remember early on in the game thinking that like I didn't expect to get there. I was like, all right, well, what else is Mystic going to do if this is it? Well, it turns out they're going to keep doing that, but they're going to be able to introduce new archetypes quicker than other classes because of that. You know what I mean? Because it's always, will to do damage. But how are you doing it? Are you doing it with Shriveling? Are you doing it with Shards of the Void? Are you doing it with Song of the Dead because you're bad at the game? Are you doing it with events? Like what? So, I mean, I kid. That's the name of the card, right? Song of the Dead? The skull? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ugh, what a terrible card. But there's so many different ways that you can do that you can use your will to do damage and use your will to get clues now with Mystic, that I really do feel like they have ballooned into archetypes much quicker than other classes, where other classes are still getting pieces for, again, like the Succeed by 2 Rogue or the Big Hand Seeker, that sort of thing. So They really are. I would agree that they probably are the most versatile class. It pains me to say that, but they probably are, because you can build whatever you want to do with a Mystic, with almost any Mystic.
Whenever I think of Mystic, I think of it's an interesting class design, because for Mystics, like, every problem looks like a willpower shaped hole, basically. Like, everything is designed around putting things in a place where willpower can solve that problem, whether it's fighting or evading. So one of the things with rogues I didn't really talk about is they're a class that often doesn't require a lot of setup, because your enemy management is on the card evade. You can just kind of use that. Whereas Mystic is the opposite, where they're one of the classes, along with Guardian, I think, where it takes a lot of setup, which is sometimes why I've struggled with Mystic solo, but not as much now as I did in the past. So they require a lot of setup, because you got to get the things on the board that let you use your willpower. But once you do, then you're using willpower for everything, including the Mythos phase. So you're kind of able to leverage that one stat to do everything, which kind of gives you a lot of power once you reach that point. So, like, if you boost your willpower, suddenly you're boosting your ability to fight and investigate and deal with treacheries. Like, you're getting more bang for your buck at that point.
Yep. And, we've definitely expanded a little bit. There's things like I don't know, if you're a mystic who has an interest in using your real stats like a normal person, you could do things like Crystalline Elder Sign, or the Summoned Hound is actually a really interesting kind of push in that direction. Of course, there's the bodies. It's Myriad, and your Empower Self. Right?
Oh yeah. I was just thinking about that card. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's in kind of an odd place, and there aren't many mystics that look at it. But I've got a Diana build that uses it really well. It's my current solo Diana build that I mentioned earlier, and it's good. I'm very much enjoying it. So I don't know. There's some very odd things that Mystic gets to do. And I think one of the other things to talk about, because we haven't even mentioned it in this episode, despite the fact that we're 3 classes down and 1 to go, Mystic kind of has the corner of the market on arcane slots for the most part. Like, there are certain decks in other classes where you take arcane using assets, but it's not something you're ever really thinking about until you hit purple cards, to my mind.
No, totally. I think the only...
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I kept going back to what Ian said about Mystic takes some setup, but once you're set up, you're generally in a pretty good position to deal with not only the flow of the game, but also the Mythos phase. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think, like, the only time that I remember running into big issues with a setup Mystic is when, I run out of juice and have to swap my assets, and, we're like Act 3 of the game or whatever. Or B, when I draw an encounter card that forces an agility test, or forces a combat test, or forces a test that isn't will. Because, they encounter cards do kind of monopolize will, but at the same time, we've been seeing more and more encounter cards that focus on other stats. They exist. Much to the excitement of the other classes, but much to the chagrin of Mystics. And is that what I keep forgetting what Empower Self does. That's the one that lets you do a different, like, you don't have to replace. Oh, no, wait. That doesn't interact with those, does it?
Well, what Empower Self does, the important thing that Empower Self does, is there's one for each of the other non-willpower stats. Yeah. It's a free exhaust to give you +2 to that stat for a test. That's the important thing.
Okay, so that's how you...
If you're in a position to use it, you can ignore a willpower replacement test for one of those stats.
Right. Yeah. So it is a weird place, but that is also kind of like the one tool that Mystics have, other than just throwing skill cards in your deck, to deal with those encounter cards that force you to test a different, skill. Or you can just run Ward of Protection and just say no.
I was about to say, or you just friggin' cancel it. That's also an option.
Yep.
And things like Deny Existence and other things like that, there are some good options that feel very mysticky to just take it on the face and still be okay.
Defiance. I love Defiance.
Defiance, yeah.
Level 2 Defiance is like, so good.
Well, speaking of which, I think the other big thing that Mystic corners the market on is Chaos Bag manipulation, particularly token play.
Oh, sure.
And it's very, very important. It would be a great mechanic regardless of what stat you're using. Mm-hmm. But the fact that then that kind of goes in with willpower, and the fact that a lot of the token play things want you to find bad stuff tokens in particular, which tend to have higher modifiers, and the fact that you're able to put all of your eggs in the one basket of willpower means you're also better able to cope with finding those higher modifiers. So it's an interesting game to play, but like token manipulation, especially in a post-Jacqueline world, is very, very fun.
This is where Mystic has actually grabbed me and become more interesting to me, is the Chaos Bag manipulation piece. Like playing recently with Mateo and Blessed Tokens and Olive. I remember when Olive was first revealed, I was like, why the hell would you want to draw 3 Chaos Tokens and resolve 2? But it's so much fun picking the right moments to use it, and there's still a little bit of risk involved usually, and And just, which is, Mystic's thing of taking on that risk, whether it's taking on horror or, drawing more chaos tokens than you might want to. It's just a really fun way to play the game. Obviously, they have the sealing stuff too, where you can seal chaos tokens and remove chaos tokens from the bag. So just playing with that probability of the game is a lot of fun. And it's also one of the builds and approaches to the game that I think it's hardest to evaluate, because you don't clearly, when you hit an enemy, you see what happens. It gets damaged when you get a clue. But when you play with a bag, you're only going to see the tokens you actually see. You don't get a sense of how it would have been different in an alternate universe if you didn't manipulate the bag. So it's hardest to really quantify and understand, but maybe that's part of the fun.
Other than Premonition. That one you see exactly what it's going to be.
Oh gosh, if there's ever a card that I include in every deck that
Yes.
can take it, that's the one.
Imagine if it was neutral.
But it would just be Premonition plus 28 cards.
I want to live in that world. And I think the other big, and I'm surprised I didn't lead with this, honestly, because it's kind of like the badge I wear. The other big identity to Mystics that no one else has is Doom play. And I think for a lot of people who don't play a lot of Mystic or who are newer, whatever it is, that can be very scary. And, for anyone who's been sitting across from a Mystic who did it wrong and it went wrong and you accidentally popped the agenda early, that can be a thing too. But, oh man, there are some really, really powerful effects that just, I don't know. I really, really like the pressing your luck that comes from Doom play.
That's a Mystic archetype that I would like to see expanded on, because currently I think that's probably the weakest when you think of the big Mystic archetypes. That one has the least amount of cards for it, I think. There's
Probably.
Blood Pact, there's an Investigator, obviously Marie. And then there's a couple of other things here and there, but really
There's
I think
Renfield.
yeah, there's Renfield, there's Moonlight Ritual. Is that the one? Yeah, removes all doom from one thing. Sacrifice. But I think that there's room
Just
for
being
more.
Dexter Drake.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's room for more cards that add doom, or maybe have extra effects that happen when a player card adds doom, stuff like that.
Yeah, the tome we just got is the perfect example of, I think, what you're talking about, and I really would love to see more stuff kind of pushed in that direction. Abyssal Tome?
Yes, I believe so.
The right one? Yeah. And
I agree. That's one I'd like to see fleshed out more, because it's kind of we talked about Seekers. They kind of run right to the win objective, and Doom play is basically flirting with the lose condition of scenarios. So you want them to be powerful enough to justify it. But yeah, I've definitely tried it a bit. Obviously, Renfield gives you a lot of power for your Doom buck, but
I'll be handing out flyers for the Church of Renfield after.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes into another part of not Renfield, another part of Mystic. Mystic and Renfield are not the one and the same, despite appearances. Another part of playing as Mystic is I think it doesn't require it, but it rewards the best kind of pre-knowledge of the encounter deck, what encounter cards are in there, especially if you're playing Gloria, obviously, but just in general, because you have cancels, you have Doom play, you need to know what cards advance Doom, what are the treacheries you really need to cancel, what are the things you can let slide. Having that knowledge of the encounter deck is something that rewards Mystics more than any other class.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. Well,
do your homework.
For sure. Do you guys have any decks that stick out to you? Nick, I know you love some Olive.
I do. I really love Olive.
I've never heard you actually express as much love for any ally as I think I've heard you express.
I was so excited. It's weird because I also love Leo. To me, Leo is still, even though he's so basic, he's one of the coolest rogue allies. He is basic Leo. But he's just so fun. And Olive is kind of the opposite. It's kind of like how I said Roland and Luke are my two favorite investigators, because one just plays the game well and the other one does all this crazy shit that you wouldn't expect. Like Leo, just, extra action. There you go. He just does it. And Olive is like, all right, what can I do with this? I get to look at 3 and choose 2. And Mystic already has so many card effects that are like, when you reveal a blank. And yeah, she's so fun. I wish we had like a level 4 version that didn't exhaust. But I don't know. You know what I mean? Like some way to play with it to get her to fire more than once a turn. But yeah, she's great. So by that token, I really love Bag Control Jim. We did that. I did that.
I see what you did.
War of the Outer Gods. I played Bag Control Jim. He's really fun. I really love that archetype. But then also, like I said, just janky ass Event Luke. Like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Knowledge is power. Turning any one of your spell assets into a ranged ability is great. Yeah, Mystic has a lot of fun builds.
By far the wackiest of.
Yeah. I definitely the Mateo Bless, but it could be other Mystics and Bless too. Is fun and the Mystics and Curse, of course. But some of the other ones are Battle Mage Akachi that I've run before. Is where you just kind of put out all these attack spells and use the charges and just turn her into a killer. And then the other one, kind of going way back in the day, is Agnes, and also as a killer and loading up on all these kind of sanity effects to deal horror. She's still one of the best boss killers around for my money, where you can just kind of leverage her ability to just deal crazy amounts of damage and take down a boss quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm actually really sad Scott's not here. I was ready to get into a fight with him as to how good Enchanted Mystic Blade is. Or Mystic Enchanted Blade. He's still... I have to fight with him over it in certain investigators. It's just straight up better than Shriveling. But anyway. Yeah, so Dex, I would point out, if you want to play like the hard caster, like an Agnes or an Akachi is a really good way to go. Dexter's in there too, because he takes away a lot of the pressure of how many actions it takes you to play down your kit. Yeah. Like, he's crazy efficient in that way. Of course, I'll always advocate for Diana. Yeah, if we're talking about the class identity being like the tension of the build up, and then like the late game, you're just bringing it home. No one does it better than Diana. The first few turns with Diana is always like, no, get the train rolling, please. And then Gloria, I'd say, is another one.
Oh my god!
She's new, but she's stupid good, and she plays so differently from any other investigator with actually being able to really get some good efficiency and play out scrying effects.
She's so good.
I will, and here's the thing: she's that good now. I have found her replacement signature Ruth to be like middling at best. When we get her actual cards, she's gonna be bonkers.
So yeah, just talking about solo mystics, like if you want to play solo mystic, Gloria is your jam.
Yes.
And then I think the last one I'd throw out there is, if you're ever in the mood to do any kind of token play, whether that be like the straight Mystic token play, or whether you're like dipping your toes into like Bless and Curse stuff, Jacqueline, she is so good. Like, just printed on her card, that ability to cherry pick a Chaos Bag pull for whatever reason you need to do it is just amazing and very, very mystic. All right, guys, let's bring it home with everyone's second favorite class.
Yep.
Ye Old Survivors. You know, I keep looking at each of these classes. I feel like we have so many investigators, but I think Mystic is the only one where we have 10 or more. Everyone else
Mystic is the most.
Those promos.
Yeah.
That's right. So I'd say that as far as Survivor identity goes, and I think Scott is the first one to say this, so I'll credit him because it's so right, but like, the difference between playing each Survivor is wider than any other class.
Oh, totally.
Even though they share colors.
Totally.
Yeah, they definitely have the most wonky stuff going on, and it's hard to talk about them as a class. You kind of have to talk about them per investigator, which we can't really do, but I mean, there are some big like themes we can talk about, which is failing to do things, failing forward, like, and that goes all the way back to like, look what I found, but it's developed more and more that you get good stuff for failing.
Yep. Survivors.
It's kind of a broader theme of doing things at an ostensible disadvantage, and whether you intend to fail and reap the benefits from it, or you're doing things like lucky or live and learn or anything like that, like just punching up. Basically, you're just punching up the whole game as a survivor.
Yeah, Survivor archetypes also, there's, obviously a lot of discard play. Playing with your discard pile, pulling cards back, playing things from your discard pile, that sort of thing. Glimmer of Hope and Fortuitous Discovery, I like both of those cards a lot. And those are Survivor, and those are Survivor discard play. Also, skills. Silas, obviously, but really in general, I think Survivor gets the most use out of their skills. Primarily because of recursion, but also just because, you get cards I guess it is recursion. I was going to say True Survivor, which, I didn't really think was that amazing, but then Stella came out, and I was like, oh my god, True Survivor Stella is, yeah, that's great.
Pull her signatures back.
All three of those signatures back to hand, yeah. I'm trying to think of other archetypes with Survivor, because they all kind of feel like a mini version of one of the other classes, but with their own little spin on it. Wendy is kind of but she's also, I was going to call her mini Mystic because she has that token filtering. Yorick is obviously mini Guardian because he focuses on enemy management and specifically asset play. We want to talk about archetypes we want to see expanded on. I would love to see more of the no item Survivor. I want to see more of that.
Build.
Lean build. We have On Your Own. We have a couple versions of it now, which are actually pretty good. But I want to see more of the able-bodied act of desperation, that idea where you're running light on items and you're focusing on events and other ways to consistently get you through a scenario.
I think another thing that survivors have had historically and has gotten better over time, even better over time, is just resilience. All the soaks, you have your Cherish Keepsake and Leather Coat early in the game, but now, and Peter, of course, big man on campus. Then we added, what's the damage version? Jessica Hyde.
Yep.
Yeah.
The balanced one.
Yeah, when you have those two out, you're just soaking everything. So that's been another, and it's one of the reasons why when I think of the quintessential solo class, Survivors, traditionally I've had a lot of success playing solo Survivor, which makes sense. It fits the theme.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I would really like to see maybe leveraged is discard play, I guess, and in the way of maybe discarding cards from your play area to receive a bonus, or we do have some of that. But the big thing that came out of the core set that was a prediction for me was scavenging. That's going to be a cornerstone of the Survivor identity, because it makes so much sense from a thematic perspective, and I don't think too many decks include scavenging. Min likes it, but that's the only one I can think of, kinda. So I guess I'd like to see maybe a little bit more play. I'd say the high mark for me for discard play is the Noldor archetype out of the Lord of the Rings LCG. Just seeing other things in your discard pile. As I'm describing this, I realize we do have a lot of this already, but it's what I want to expand it to.
Yeah, and since we're on the topic of expanding archetypes, and maybe it's just I haven't played it enough, but this whole aspect of Survivor is the Home Alone aspect, the traps, the tricks, the lures, the hiding spots, all those kind of cards that you play on a location to do things to enemies is a lot of fun. And I think I'd like to, maybe we get an investigator or an asset or something that plays with those a bit and gives you some rewards for playing those out, or makes it easier to play those out, more of an incentive. I think that would be fun. But that's an aspect of like using the environment to do stuff. Yeah. Survivor is the class in a horror movie where you find a vase on a table and smash it over the head of someone, so it's it's all about using the environment to do stuff.
Well, and if there's any campaign where that desire is going to come out, it's fucking Innsmouth, man. Like, if I can just snare trap a deep one and never have to actually engage it to take care of it, like, there's appeal to that.
Yeah.
As far as where they're at now, I think there were another one that struggled a little. Yeah, they struggled a little bit with clue acquisition.
Oh, yeah.
Not so much with Windy because she can filter the tokens a bit, but they just didn't have as much options. But now they really do, and they can get a lot of clues and fight enemies.
Yeah. I think clue acceleration they still kind of struggle with, but not so much to where solo is impossible. Well, I mean, or even like a Clover survivor in 2-player. You know, like you could do it.
Yeah, we've gotten more options recently, but I think in terms of both damage and clue acceleration, that's been one of the like features of survivors. They can't do it as efficiently as other classes with one action, but maybe they have a better chance of being successful or capitalizing on it.
Those first level skills that we got in TCU, I think, have done a lot for, I think, every survivor. Brute force and keen mind. Those two skills alone have changed
What's the third
game.
one? Can you name it?
Expeditious Retreat. I can name it because it's the name of it's the name of a spell in D&D, so I remember the name, but I never use it. Never use it.
And for some people, it basically doesn't exist. So.
Right? Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. I think one piece of the survivor identity that I think is possibly, arguably, underdeveloped is exile. Because it was outlined in the core set, so it was obviously intended from the beginning. We didn't actually get an exile card until Dunwich, though, if I'm remembering correctly.
No, I'm pretty sure it was introduced in Dunwich. I don't think it was outlined at all in the core set.
Wasn't it? Okay, yeah. Well, maybe I'm wrong. But either way, it is definitely specific to Survivor. I feel like exile cards don't get run a whole lot nowadays. Like, I'd maybe see decks with like a Test of Will, particularly standalone decks. It becomes more attractive.
Well,
do you think...
I was going to say, I think exile was kind of the Survivor answer to high XP cards. Every other class had cards that cost 4 or 5 XP, but for the longest time, Survivor's highest XP cards were 3. And then they just had, every cycle would introduce 1 or 2 cards that were exile. And so that would be where you're spending that excess XP is to get those back, theoretically. But we did just have, in Dream Eaters, was it Dream Eaters? I can't remember now. We did just have a card that encourages you to buy and rebuy exile cards.
You're thinking of Deja Vu out of Stella.
Is that it? The one with the stray cat art, but they have like weird eyes or whatever. Yeah. Something like that. So I think when you say exile is underdeveloped, I guess I both agree and disagree with that. I disagree because I can think of a lot of exile cards. I don't use a lot of them, but I can think of a lot of them, so that they're there.
Right.
But I also agree because it's like, okay, other than just slapping exile on a card, it's not developed. Like, there's more things like Deja Vu, I think, that we could be seeing that play with exile without straight up exiling cards.
And quite possibly it's just the kind of mechanic that's so simple there's not a whole lot to do with it, because just by its nature it's a little bit more simplistic, and like, exile is what exile is, and that's what it does.
Yeah, the exile point reminds me of just the XP question in general, that survivors have the smallest gap between like starting builds and higher XP builds than any other class. Like, with a little bit of XP, you can do a lot in Survivor, and really be at a place where when you get more XP, it's kind of a bonus more than essential. Like, so Survivors don't take a lot of XP to get up and running and be powerful.
Yeah, I'd say even like standalone decks, I rarely would build over 19 XP. So like, even if you have it available to you, you kind of just don't need it very often. All right, well, I know this is probably going to be the hardest one to answer, but any particular archetypes or decks that stick out to you for encapsulating your Survivor experience?
Desperate Duke.
Yep.
I'm gonna go back to it because I was blown away by how good it was. Desperate Duke is so good.
I gotta throw one out there. One of the most incredibly fun experiences I had with Survivor was the Patrice deck I played in our TCU Iron Man. Like, first, Patrice, she just plays so differently from any other investigator, let alone differently from all the other survivors. But just the efficiency you can throw together and how flexible you can be when you see that many cards is really fun. And it's crazy because if you look at Patrice's stat line, she's actually deficient from most other investigators, but it doesn't matter. She's so good.
One of the ones that's new for me, but because this investigator has quickly become one of my favorites, is Stella, running the Stella fail by build, and I'm running her through Innsmouth, and I took the Quick Learner permanent, which is the one where it gives you +1 difficulty during your first action and -1 at the end, and it's just such a fun build to figure out how you're going to play with that and when you're going to take certain actions. And God, Stella's so powerful. Like every time I fail at a scenario, I usually play Stella next so that I can have the experience of blowing it away. And every time I sit down with that build, I know it's going to be a blast no matter what happens. So, but then other than that, obviously, just some of the Rita builds I've run with the bow especially, and just being able to really handle and lock down enemies. And it's the main reason why that's memorable is because that build along with Ursula's when I finally got all the locations in Boundary Beyond. So forever close to my heart.
I got to throw a prop out to Silas as well, because Silas, probably more so than Patrice, feels a little bit more survivory, but he's almost maybe a little bit closer to what you were referring to, Nick, though I don't think he's like all the way to see it actualized. But Silas can run really lean, and you don't have to play too many assets out, and you can just commit the billions of cards you have in your hand.
The Silas deck that I'm running in Innsmouth has 3 items. It has his net, his harpoon, and meat cleaver, and that's it.
Yep. And he'll run just fine that way.
Yeah,
it's really cool. All right. Well, I said it at the beginning. I'll say it again now. I feel like the faction design and the state of classes is in a fantastic place in current Arkham. Obviously, there's got to be room to grow. And I'm very excited to see what new investigators bring to the table. But we've long past hit that tipping point where I'm just seeing new ideas and new decks just constantly being brought from cards that have existed for a long time. So really cool time in the age of the game. Beautiful. Well, guys, let's round this out with a little bit of tentacle time. Ian, what's been grabbing you?
Oh, so many things I'm trying to think about. So one, as I'm continuing reading through the Expanse series of books, I'm all the way up to book 8 now, which gives you a sense of how quickly I've been reading through these things because they're such good reads. And I find it funny because the authors of this book series are kind of in the same circle as George R.R. Martin. They're also in New Mexico and part of a circle, and just the pace at which they're able to write books is really astounding compared to their mentor. Anyway, moving on from that, the other thing I've done that I'll talk about now is just playing Arkham Horror Mother's Embrace, which is the new digital game that came out recently. I tried to do a stream on Thursday with Nick playing through it, which had to cut short because of the technical difficulties, but it's really kind of a fairly simple game of it started out Mansions of Madness branded, but they changed it to Arkham Horror. But I think it's really kind of has that Mansions of Madness DNA that's closer to what it is, because you basically move around rooms, you look at clues, and then it's kind of turn-based combat when you fight enemies, and has an action system, like you have 5 actions to spend and can do various things with it. Anyone who's played like turn-based combat games would be familiar. And I enjoy it so far. Like, I think people have really ranged from really not liking it and getting refunds to enjoying it. I haven't seen anyone blown away like this is their favorite game, so I'm not saying that. I think if you like the Arkham Files universe, getting to spend time with those characters is fun, and it does what it does, simple enough, and it's like the price point is like $15, I think, so they didn't try to gouge people and promise like a big budget experience. It's not that, like, it's, you know, it's not high tier graphics or anything like that. So I think it's mostly just if people enjoy the Arkham Files universe and they don't mind spending $15 on a game, that it's probably not. I think the playtime is maybe like 9 or 10 hours, something like that. Then I would recommend it.
Cool. Yeah, I bought it myself. Haven't had a chance to crack it yet, but I don't know. Even if it's not the best game in the world, I still like the idea of supporting the IP expanding into other media.
Yeah, agreed.
There's value in that. Nick, how about you?
I too I just finished, actually. I've been listening to the audiobooks of The Expanse. I just finished book 1, Leviathan's Wake, and oh my god, that is a good book. It's so good. I was blown away. I knew it was good, obviously, because it got turned into an Amazon series. So I figured it had to have at least some measure of quality to it. But really, really good. And I'm excited to start book 2 here pretty soon. I've heard that the quality kind of falls off after the first trilogy, because it's 3 trilogies, I think, is what they're doing. And after that first trilogy, it kind of like I heard they're still good, but it's just like that first trilogy is really, really, really like standalone awesome. So I'm excited to at the very least do those 3. Probably I'll do the whole series. Audiobooks it's so easy for me to just chew through them in no time. So other than that, every Tuesday, come watch us play D&D at 7 p.m. Central to 11 p.m. Central. Ian plays. Sean's in chat every so often. We also have, obviously, MJ, Mr. Trench from chat, Stokes Book from chat, DeLarp Guy, Osiluth. So we got a good crew. And we probably only have, seriously, like 6 to 10 sessions left. We are closing in on the end of this campaign. So come and join us for the climax of it. These last few sessions, these last few environments are really cool. The Caves of Hunger we're in right now, and it's one of my favorite dungeons from an official campaign so far. And then the last area is also really, really fun. So yeah, and obviously if you can't watch us live, then go to YouTube, to my channel Nick Corey on YouTube, and you can watch the VODs there.
Beautiful. All right. Oh wow. Well, of course. Dogs start barking right for my tentacle time. I'm going to be really short. I've actually been really busy the past couple of weeks. I've been playing, most of my gaming time has just been Arkham. But I did crack into a little bit of Lord of the Rings, the living card game by Fantasy Flight Games. And I actually built a couple of new decks with the new cards that have come out. And there's some cool stuff in there. The contracts are very interesting from a deck building perspective. And I fired up the Gen Con scenario from the last event. You know, Moria is just like my favorite setting in the Lord of the Rings anyway. But yeah, had a decent time with it. Also reminded a little bit of the skeleton of that game kind of being deficient now with how used to Arkham I am. Like the fact that you have 50 card decks and the base framework of the game only drips you a 1 card per turn.
Yeah.
I'm almost getting to the point where I want to house rule 30 card decks with 2 ofs except for the cards that where it actually matters, and you know, draw a card a turn, or just I don't know, I want to house rule it somehow. But everything else is cool. Everything else is as I left it. So yeah, anyway. All right, everyone. Well, it was fun talking to you guys about the classes. Go check out March to Madness. Like Nick said, you've got a short amount of time to go get your tier lists in, and then pay attention to our social media and our website for updates on actually doing the brackets, because we're going to get this thing kicked off right quick. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us for episode 102. We will catch you next time.